Chapter 609. At that moment, time seemed to slow down in Qin Yining's eyes. Everything around her could no longer be seen clearly. She screamed and reached out to pull Ji Yun back, but her body was heavy now, and her stomach was in the way. She could not save Ji Yun as quickly as before, and could only watch as the sharp arrow headed straight for Ji Yun. Ji Yun could have dodged it. However, Qin Yining was behind her, so how could she dodge? Moreover, Tianjiz's blade was as white as snow, and it was about to reach her in the blink of an eye. Ji Yun gritted her teeth, and her gaze suddenly turned cold. She did not retreat or give way. Instead, she flicked the soft sword in her hand, and the soft sword that was originally wrapped around her waist like a silver belt, pierced straight towards Tianjiz's throat at this moment. Even if she had to exchange a life for a life, it was still a gain for her. Tianjizi did not expect Qin Yining to have such a loyal servant by his side. Seeing the tip of the sword coming towards her, she panicked and tried to dodge. However, Tianjizi did not know martial arts. She was so frightened that her heartbeat quickened, and she tried to retreat in a panic. Meanwhile, the arrow that was aimed at Ji Yun was already in front of her. At the critical moment, a white figure suddenly appeared in front of her nimbly. He flicked away Ji Yun's soft sword that was aimed at Tianjizi, and waved his other hand in front of Ji Yun. Under the vibration of his wide sleeves, the arrow that was like a hot knife through butter was deflected to the side. With a thud, the arrow buried itself in a thick tree, and half of the arrow's body was embedded in it. Young Master Mu. Qin Yining was pleasantly surprised and worried at the same time. He quickly pulled Ji Yun to his side to protect her. Mu Jinghu restrained Ji Yun, protected Tianjizi, and saved Ji Yun. Qin Yining still could not see through his position. Ji Yun had almost lost her life just now, and now she was so scared that her forehead was covered in cold sweat. Mu Jinghu turned around and greeted Tianjizi, martial uncle. Tianjizi was almost killed by Ji Yun just now and was still in shock. She should be happy that she was saved, but Mu Jinghu also saved Ji Yun. Her face darkened as she reprimanded, "Get out of the way. Martial uncle. Why did you drug me? Why? Wasn't it because she was afraid that he would ruin things?" Tianjizi looked up and glared at Mu Jinghu. He gritted his teeth and said, "Get out of the way, don't you understand?" Mu Jinghu stood rooted to the ground like a wooden stake. He lowered his head and said, "Uncle, please stop." Seeing that Mu Jinghu was still the same as before, Qin Yining heaved a sigh of relief. Even Ji Yun and Bing Tang were full of hope. Mu Jinghu's martial arts were unfathomable. As long as he was willing to help, Tianjizi would definitely not be able to do anything today. "Stop. What do you know?" Tianjizi was furious. His eyes were red as he roared, "Back then, Master taught you martial arts so that you could protect me. Why are you siding with an outsider now? Don't tell me you can't bear to take her life like that, Lu Gai. Or are you like Ji Yun too? Is that Pang Xiao worth all of you protecting his wife? Martial uncle, Pang Zhishi is my friend. He once entrusted me to protect the Qin clan. I can't let you kill her. You." Tianjizi glared at Mu Jinghu. His eyes were bloodshot. He gritted his teeth and said, "What if I must kill her? Are you going to betray your sect?" Mu Jinghu said helplessly, "Martial uncle, the Qin clan is just a woman. Why must you kill her? Moreover, she is pregnant now. Killing her is equivalent to killing 3 people. You are too cruel." "I'm cruel? You don't know anything. Don't meddle in our affairs." Tianjizi couldn't take it anymore. He pointed the knife at Mu Jinghu and said, "Get out of my way. Martial uncle." Mu Jinghu lifted his robe and knelt on the wet ground. "Martial uncle, please don't kill anymore. Unfilial son, I'll kill you first." Tianjizi roared angrily. He raised the knife with both hands and slashed it at Mu Jinghu. Mu Jinghu knelt on the ground. He raised his hand and waved his sleeve. Tianjizi felt a strong gust of wind in front of him. Clang! There was a crisp sound of metal. The knife in Tianjizi's hand was broken at the base. Tianjizi only had the handle of the knife left in his hand. He was shaken and staggered 2 steps back before falling to the ground. The archer in the distance saw this and quickly drew his bow and shot an arrow at Qin Yining. Mu Jinghu stood up and unhurriedly waved the broken blade casually. The arrow was split into 2 halves and fell to the ground due to the loss of strength. The archer did not expect Mu Jinghu to have such a skill. He was furious and wanted to draw his bow again. However, a silver light flashed and he felt a chill in his chest. He looked down and saw that Mu Jinghu's broken knife was stuck in his chest. Mu Jinghu stood in front of Qin Yining and the rest with his hands behind his back. He looked relaxed. The archer's eyes widened in horror. His tall body fell to the ground and he twitched as he stopped breathing. At this moment, there was a rush of footsteps and the sound of horse hooves. 3 of the guards that Ji Zheyu had arranged for Qin Yining rushed over. Princess consort. The 3 of them were injured. They held their knives and stood in front of Qin Yining. They looked at Tian Jizi and Mu Jinghu warily. Qin Yining's eyes dimmed. He knew that the remaining 2 would not be able to come. Just like the archer who was driving the carriage, Tian Jizi sat on the muddy ground and looked at Qin Yining's guards who had arrived. She then looked at Mu Jinghu who was standing firmly in front of her. She suddenly threw away the knife in her hand and laughed loudly. Ha ha ha. It's really destiny, destiny. I've calculated everyone in the world, but you're the only one I can't predict. You're the variable. Everything around you is a variable. Since the heavens have given me this mission, why do they still allow you to exist? You should have died long ago. Tian Jizi got up and pointed at Qin Yining. If you don't die, I don't know how long the world will be in chaos. Qin Yining frowned. He looked at Tian Jizi's crazed appearance and felt a little sad. How many people in the world could turn metaphysics into a career? Whether Tian Jizi's predictions were accurate or not was another matter. She had put in so much effort for this matter that Qin Yining didn't know whether to praise her persistence or despise her ignorance. Martial uncle, let's go. Mu Jinghu rubbed his aching temples and turned to look at Qin Yining. Qin Yining hurriedly bowed with Ji Yun and Bing Tang. Young Master Mu, thank you very much. Mu Jinghu shook his head and sighed. Don't hate my martial uncle. He's doing this for the world. As he spoke, he felt that his request was somewhat unreasonable. Qin Yining had almost been killed. Tian Jizi had instigated him to harm her in Taitan. Now that she was pregnant and was being hunted down, how could he not hate him? Mu Jinghu cupped his hands in shame and turned to help Tian Jizi up. Tian Jizi climbed up shakily and slapped away Mu Jinghu's hand. She muttered, "Destiny, change, destiny, change." She walked away dejectedly. Mu Jinghu could only silently follow behind Tian Jizi. Wang Fei, should we let her go? A guard bowed and asked. Qin Yining shook his head. With him here, you won't be able to kill her. He turned to look at the 3 injured people and said apologetically, I've implicated you. Wang Fei, don't blame yourself. We are the Marquis's guards. We swear to obey the Marquis's orders. The Marquis wants us to protect Wang Fei, so we will do our best to protect Wang Fei. Qin Yining wiped the rainwater off his face and said, bury our brothers for now and make a mark. We will return to the city and make arrangements before coming back to find them. Yes. The 3 went to find the corpses of their brothers and buried them beside the forest to make a mark. The rest of the journey was extremely dull but also very smooth. Qin Yining's carriage arrived at the gate of the Wangfu. The gatekeeper immediately ran inside happily to pass the message. There were also people who removed the door sills and helped to drive the carriage. When the Wangfu's guards saw the 3 guards, they knew that they must have experienced a tough battle on the road. They immediately turned pale with fright and frantically came to inquire about the situation. Qin Yining helped Bing Tang and Ji Yun off the carriage. The servants who came to hold the umbrella for her were also stunned when they saw that her clothes were soaked, her hair was disheveled, and her skirt was covered in mud. Qin Yining said, quickly find a doctor to treat the 3 of them. Also, go find the location of the 3 brothers. Qin Huayuan sprained his ankle, so it was inconvenient for him to rush out at this time. However, the Sun Clan and Madame Ma were together when they heard the news. At this time, they came over together. When they saw the situation of Qin Yining and the others, the 2 of them were shocked. The Sun Clan came forward and grabbed Qin Yining's hands. They rubbed his hands to warm her hands and asked, Sister Yi, how did you become like this? What happened on the road? Madam, let the child change clothes and wash up first to avoid catching wind. Madam Ma said and turned around to order people to prepare a sedan. Qin Yining smiled at Madam Ma and the Sun Clan to comfort them. Don't worry, I'm fine. I'll go back and tidy up first. Let Bing Tang take a look at me. By the way, where is my father? Your father is in the room. His ankle is swollen like a steamed bun. The Sun Clan looked at the 3 guards who were being helped down and asked worriedly, Did something happen to you? Qin Yining smiled and said, It's okay. Mother, don't worry. At this time, a sturdy woman came over with a stretcher. Qin Yining sat on it with the help of Bing Tang and Ji Yun. The women carefully carried her to the veranda and went all the way to Saiqing Garden. The Sun Clan and Madam Ma looked at each other. Both of their eyes were filled with worry. Something must have happened to this child. Madam Ma, go and tell Grandfather Ma. I'll go and see how the girl is doing. The Sun Clan immediately nodded. The 2 of them walked away quickly. One went to Saiqing Garden, while the other went to Sai Shui Garden. Qin Yining changed out of her wet clothes and used hot water to wipe her body. She also washed her hair. She ate soup to expel the cold and medicine to prevent miscarriage. Then she changed into casual clothes and sat on the Kang bed wrapped in a blanket. Although it was not winter yet, when Qin Yining said it was cold, the servants immediately heated the Kang bed. It was not very hot, but it was still warm to sit on. Qin Yining sighed comfortably. She pulled Ji Yun and Bing Tang, who had also tied it up, to sit on the Kang bed. She also called Xian Yun and Lian Xiaoju to sit beside her. The best Kang bed in the north is this. Yes. Princess Consort, do you feel uncomfortable anywhere? Xian Yun asked worriedly. Mrs. Ma got up with a smile and gave up her seat. After thinking for a while, she held the Sun Clan's hand and said, In-law, let's go to the kitchen and see what we can make for Lass Yi. The Sun Clan also knew that she didn't understand what was going on outside. Besides, she was most worried about Qin Yining's health now, so she went along with Mrs. Ma's words and said, Sister Yi hasn't eaten well in the past 3 days. I asked the kitchen to stew some black chicken soup. Let's go and see if there's anything else to nourish her body. Mrs. Ma and the Sun Clan went out with their people, leaving only Qin Huayuan, Qin Yining, Bing Tang, Ji Yun, Xian Yun, and Lian Xiaoju in the room. Qin Huayuan asked, What happened on the way here? Qin Yining told Qin Huayuan in detail how they went down the mountain just now, who were the guards arranged by Ji Zheyu, what they experienced on the way, and what Tian Jizi and Mu Jinghu said to each other. Qin Huayuan put his sprained foot flat on the edge of the Kang bed and leaned back against the soft ink cushion. He lowered his eyes and listened carefully, gently tapping the table with his hand. After Qin Yining finished, Qin Huayuan said, So, she calculated that your Majesty's life would be saved because of Wang Yi's presence, so she thought you were a variable and came to kill you? That's right. Qin Yining frowned and said, I think Tian Jizi must be crazy. Who would take a fortune-telling so seriously and treat it as a golden rule? For the sake of the so-called righteous path, Tian Jizi is willing to do anything. This is simply absurd. Qin Huayuan said, Actually, Tian Jizi is similar to many people who place great importance on their beliefs. For the things they believe in, they can give up everything. She thinks that everything she does is correct, so she naturally feels that all of our actions are in the way. But at least there is some good news. If her calculations were accurate, Wang Yi should still be alive. Yes. Qin Yining couldn't help but smile. The depression he had felt over the past few days had dissipated because of this news. As long as Pang Xiao was alive, there was still hope for their future. Qin Huayuan thought for a moment and said, This news hasn't been verified yet, so it's not appropriate to publicize it for the time being. Otherwise, it'll be hard for us to explain if someone asks. Qin Yining agreed and said, Something happened to your Majesty, and now there are so many variables in the palace. The people who control power have just tasted the sweetness, so they definitely don't want anyone to stop them. If they knew that your Majesty was still alive, they would create rumors about Prince Li being in charge of the country, and even change the commander-in-chief of the Tiger Army. That would be a great disrespect to your Majesty. Others might not believe this news, but the people who control power would definitely say that the person who spread the rumor had ulterior motives. It's not appropriate for the Wang mansion to have too many complications right now. As long as they know that Pang Xiao is still alive, they should dig up as soon as possible. It's good that you understand. Qin Huayuan saw that Qin Yining was so steady and said with relief, I was worried that you would be swayed by your emotions after hearing the news about Wang Yi. Qin Yining couldn't help but laugh and say, Father, you worry too much. I'm not a child. How can I not know what's important? In Qin Huayuan's eyes, wasn't Qin Yining just a child? Qin Yining thought of Tian Jiz's words just now and said hesitantly, Father, did you use the military stratagem against General Feng because my mother was pregnant with my child? Qin Huayuan had expected that Qin Yining would have doubts. He smiled and said, It's all in the past. At that time, your mother was pregnant with you. This matter wasn't Tian Jiz's fault. This was indeed one of the reasons, but it wasn't the whole story. So, the reason why Qin Huayuan used the stratagem against BG State back then was really because her mother was pregnant with her? Thinking that Pang Xiao's style of doing things outside changed because she was pregnant and tried her best to restrain herself, Qin Yining could roughly guess the situation at that time. At the very least, it was to allow her mother to give birth to her smoothly, right? Thinking of Pang Xiao's background, Qin Yining felt somewhat lucky. If Madame Pang hadn't been jealous and secretly sent Pang Xiao away when she found out that the Yarrow clan had become Pang Zhongzheng's maidservant, and the Yarrow clan had Madame Ma, who was smart and didn't let her take the child back to the Pang family to buy a bright future. Instead, she let Pang Xiao grow up in the countryside. Perhaps even Pang Xiao couldn't escape when the family was confiscated and exterminated. Wait. Tian Jizi said that Pang Xiao was destined to be a young marshal. Could it be that Pang Zhongzheng wouldn't have died if he didn't use the stratagem to sow discord? Could it be that he would eventually revolt against the tyranny of BG State? Thinking of this, Qin Yining couldn't help but tremble all over. If Pang Zhongzheng didn't fall into the trap of sowing discord and BG State couldn't find a chance to kill him, he would have enough time to prepare. In the end, he would rise up and take Pang Xiao back to his side. Then, Pang Xiao would become the son of the rebel army's leader. After overthrowing BG State, even if the throne fell on Pang Zhongzheng, it would be passed to Pang Xiao sooner or later. So, was this the real trajectory of history? If this was really the case, her existence was really a variable. Although she felt that Tian Jizi was a lunatic who was certain of destiny and crazily wanted everything to conform to her so-called destiny, but she couldn't help but admit that Tian Jizi's calculations were quite accurate. Qin Yining's heart turned 100 guesses in between breaths. Seeing her uncertain expression, Qin Huayuan knew that she was thinking about what happened in the past, so he changed the topic and said, I think one of the reasons why Prince Consort Ji is so diligent in digging up the evidence is probably because of his friendship with Wang Yi. The relationship between the ruler and his minister is secondary. Later, I'll send someone to the mountain to send a letter. If Prince Consort Ji knows about this, he will definitely urge that group of people not to slack off. Father, you also noticed. Qin Yining said, a friend in need is a friend indeed. Now that something has happened to our family, I realized that Jilan isn't what I originally thought. I think Wang Yi has a reason to trust him. Qin Huayuan smiled when he heard this. He called Jingzhe over and whispered something in his ear. Jingzhe accepted the order and immediately went out without hesitation. The atmosphere in the room was unprecedentedly relaxed since Pang Xiao's incident. Seeing that Qin Yining's complexion was quite good, Qin Huayuan said, Father originally thought that if we couldn't find anyone in the next few days, once the power of the imperial court was transferred to someone else, the speed of saving people would definitely be reduced. At that time, I'm afraid that Wang Yi really wouldn't have any hope of being saved. If something like that really happened, Father would take you back to your hometown, far away from the clamor of the imperial court. Now it seems that the heavens have opened their eyes. I thought too much and made a mistake in my calculations. If Wang Yi can be saved, that would be the best thing that could happen. Qin Yining couldn't help but sigh when he heard this. I was thinking the same thing as Father. Actually, when I was sitting on the mountain these days, I often thought about what to do in the future. If something really happens, The best place for us to go is to bring the people of the Wang estate with us. It's best for our family if we just stay in the countryside and be an ordinary citizen. While Ji Zheyu was busy organizing his subordinates to dig on the mountain, Jingzhe came to him. The two of them went to the side and whispered a few words. Ji Zheyu's tired face finally revealed the first smile he had seen in the past few days. Are these words true? My master and the Wang Fei speculated together. Although there is no conclusive evidence, it shouldn't be too far off. Your Majesty and Wang Yi must still be alive. Otherwise, the Tianjizi wouldn't have been so flustered and exasperated as to try to kill the Wang Fei. Jingzhe gave Ji Zheyu a deep bow, many thanks to the Marquis for arranging for his subordinates to protect the Wang Fei. Otherwise, the Wang Fei would have lost her life. When Ji Zheyu thought of his dead brothers, he also felt very uncomfortable. He only exchanged a few polite words with Jingzhe before anxiously going back to urge them to continue digging. The faster they dug, the higher the chances of Pang Xiao being saved. Chapter 611. What did you say? The Empress Dowager's face turned pale. She grabbed the armrest of the beautiful couch in anger and said, how could it be possible? They are all living people. How could they suddenly disappear? Don't try to fool me with this nonsense. Empress Dowager, please calm down. This servant really isn't lying. Lord Sun, Lord Li, and the other lords and their families really disappeared overnight. They are people, not birds. How can they all fly away? The Empress Dowager got up angrily and paced back and forth. After a while, she suddenly stopped and looked at the eunuch in horror. Who did you say was the one who went missing? His mind raced as he asked in horror, are those missing the ones who surrendered to the Yang dynasty? The eunuch thought about it and turned pale. He trembled in horror and stammered, Empress Dowager. Yes, the Empress Dowager thought that she was sensitive to the matters of the imperial court. She just didn't have the chance to participate in it before. Now that she thought about it, she suddenly understood. The county king of Yang and his father-in-law called Jiyu something. Are they all gone? Yes, Empress Dowager. The Empress Dowager vaguely felt that there was a huge conspiracy behind it. She forced herself to calm down and said, ask Prince Li to come to Xi'an Palace. Yes. The eunuch breathed a sigh of relief as if he had been pardoned. He stood up and bowed before leaving. The Empress Dowager said again, ask Marquis Qingyang to come here as well. Yes. After the eunuch left, the Empress Dowager paced back and forth for a while in frustration. Her mind was filled with the matters of the imperial court. She didn't know when the Taitan would mobilize their troops. Now the ministers of the Yang dynasty had also mysteriously disappeared. She didn't know if Li Chitian was still alive after being buried in the underground palace. After these days, the Empress Dowager had been freed from the panic and fear when she first received the news. Li Chitian's existence was indeed a mountain that supported her prosperity. But she couldn't rely on others forever. If she wanted to ensure the glory of the family, she could only rely on Li Chitian. It was better to take this opportunity to let the Zhu family have the opportunity to seize power. After all, the Li family could only have the surname of Li. She loved and worried about her son. But now that things had come to this, she couldn't solve the problem even if she cried herself to death. Someone had to be in charge of such a large country. Could it be that waiting for the world to fall into chaos before she, the Empress Dowager, was willing to take action? The only thing lacking was that it was too difficult to manage a country, fight with the court officials, and pacify the internal affairs. The Empress Dowager's mind was in a mess. One moment, she was worried about Li Chitian, and the next moment, she was worried that the loss of more than half of the surrendered officials was a huge conspiracy. She was afraid that she could not cope with it. Not long after, a chamberlain came in from outside the door to replying to the Empress Dowager, Prince Li, Marquis Qingyang, and eldest Princess Enyang have arrived. Let them in. The Empress Dowager sat upright with her back straight, looking dignified and aloof. The three people entered the grand hall. Prince Li and the Marquis of Qingyang both performed a grand salute, saying, Greetings, Empress Dowager. Only Li Helan bent his knees and quickly walked towards the Empress Dowager. Imperial Mother. Is there good news on the mountain? The Empress Dowager saw that Li Helan had come uninvited and acted so casually in front of Prince Li and the Marquis of Qingyang without showing any special respect. She was somewhat displeased and walked past Li Helan, saying to Prince Li and the Marquis of Qingyang, "The two of you are excused, please sit." Seeing the Empress Dowager's grave expression, Li Helan knew that he had encountered something bad. He hesitated and said, "Imperial Mother has something to say to younger cousin and younger uncle. Daughter will take her leave for now." The Empress Dowager gave a long yen and raised her hand to dismiss Li Helan. The Marquis of Qingyang observed the Empress Dowager's expression and saw that she was displeased. There must be something troubling her. He stood up and saluted. "If the Empress Dowager has anything to say, as younger brother, I will not hesitate to go through water and tread on fire." Prince Li saw the Marquis of Qingyang's display of loyalty and hurriedly stood up, saying, "The Marquis of Qingyang is right. Now that your Majesty's whereabouts are unknown, all the more reason for us to work together to overcome this difficult situation." The Empress Dowager nodded in satisfaction. "Sit down. I have just received a piece of news and am unable to think of what to do, so I am telling you. The surrendered officials who came to the court on the Dian have suddenly disappeared along with their families overnight. Do you know of this matter?" The Marquis of Qingyang shook his head and looked at Prince Li beside him. Although Prince Li was supervising the state, the relationships in the court could not be figured out in a short period of time. The things he knew were things that had already been made public. Naturally, he did not know of this news. Seeing the two's blank expressions, the Empress Dowager sighed. "Previously, I heard the Emperor say that the County King of Yang and his father-in-law were originally imprisoned in the imperial prison, but they have disappeared. Now, the officials of the Yang dynasty have also disappeared. There must be something fishy about this. I would like to discuss this matter with you. What should we do about it?" The Marquis of Qingyang said, "Could it be that these people from the Yang dynasty have become disloyal? They can't have disappeared overnight. They must have taken advantage of the chaos in the court to sneak away. I think so too. If these people have escaped, they must have some ulterior motive. That is why they have all fled together. Now that the County King of Yang has disappeared, could they be thinking of rebelling?" Prince Li heard the word rebelling. His heart skipped a beat when he heard the word rebelling. He had been stumbling around in his job as regent and had not even had a chance to gather power. Was he going to make a fuss about the Yang dynasty wanting to restore the state? The Taitan rebellion had already occurred in the north. If another Yang dynasty appeared in the south, wouldn't Daju be attacked from both sides? The County King of Yang frowned deeply. The Marquis of Qingyang was even more worried than the County King of Yang. If the Yang dynasty really caused trouble, wouldn't he, the newly appointed commander of the Tiger Army, have to lead the army into battle? Don't think like that, Empress Dowager. Everything has to be thought of in a positive direction. The people of the Yang dynasty have already been subdued. If the County King of Yang is willing to be a county king in our court, he must be someone who is afraid of death. Even if he escapes, he won't be able to cause much trouble. As for the surrendered officials of the Yang dynasty, I see that your Majesty has not given them any important positions. Their departure won't cause much trouble for us. We can just send people to the south to track them down." The Empress Dowager trusted her brother. Thinking about it carefully, she said, "If that's the case, then send people to track them down. Do it quietly and don't alert the enemy." "Yes. Leave this matter to me, Empress Dowager." The Empress Dowager thought about it and said, "Also, send people to find out how many surrendered officials of the Yang dynasty were, who escaped, and who else is in the capital. Capture them all and interrogate them strictly. These people are most likely spies left in the capital by the Yang dynasty." Empress Dowager is wise. Among the civil officials of the Dian court, isn't the most capable one Pang Zhishi's father-in-law the Pang Zhishi? We don't know if he escaped or not, but we'll go investigate later. The Empress Dowager nodded. Thinking carefully, she felt that she had not overlooked anything and quietly relaxed. She put on a smile and said, "The court is in turmoil. This is the time when I need all of you to work together. You didn't disappoint me. In the future, when the emperor is rescued and the country is stable, I will not forget your good deeds. Marquis Qingyang cupped his hands. Many thanks for the Empress Dowager's promotion. Prince Li also followed suit and bowed. However, his heart was beating like a drum. If Li Chitian was alive and saw that he was supervising the country, he didn't know what would happen to him. If that was the case, it would be better to let Li Chitian sleep in the underground palace. Thinking of this, Commandery Prince Li made some arrangements for the excavation of Mount Chongshan. The two of them chatted with the Empress Dowager for a while. Most of the time, they were encouraging the Empress Dowager with words and painted a beautiful blueprint for the future of Daju. However, at this moment, a chamberlain scrambled in from outside and said in a shrill and panicked voice, "Empress Dowager, there is news from the north. The Minister of War, official Wang, requests an audience." When the Empress Dowager heard this, she felt her hair stand on end. Could it be that the Taytan had attacked? The Empress Dowager hurriedly said, "There is no need to be so cautious now. Please invite official Wang to Xi'an Palace to see me." "Yes." The chamberlain turned around and ran. It was obvious how urgent the situation was. The Empress Dowager really couldn't stay calm at this time. First, Your Majesty was buried in Chongshan, and many of the important officials in the court were killed or injured. Then, the Yang dynasty's surrendered officials left. The Yuchi Yang must be up to something. Now, the thing they were most afraid of had happened. The Taytan had actually started to attack. The Empress Dowager felt that she couldn't bear the pressure at all. "Empress Dowager, the Minister of War, official Wang, has arrived." The chamberlain outside the hall announced, and a tall man around 40 years old quickly walked in. After seeing the Empress Dowager bow, Wang Ji did not waste any time and anxiously said, "Empress Dowager, the Taytan Yujin Khan personally led the army and launched a surprise attack. Of the 4 passes in the north, Tianyu Pass, Tianlang Pass, and Tianshu Pass have already fallen. The Dragon Legion commander Kang Cheong has retreated to Heaven's Gate and sent an urgent letter asking for reinforcement." When the Empress Dowager heard this, her head buzzed. She felt dizzy and nearly fell to the ground. Kang Cheong was the Dragon Legion commander that Your Majesty personally chose, and he couldn't beat those Taytan barbarians. When did this happen? How did the Taytan break through 3 passes without any warning? "Empress Dowager, General Kang said that Yujin Khan launched a surprise attack and caught us off guard." The Empress Dowager thought about the positions of the 3 passes. After a long while, she let out a sigh of relief. "Don't panic. Heaven's Gate is a dangerous place, and the Dragon Legion army is not weak. If they retreat to Heaven's Gate, as long as our reinforcements arrive in time, it will be fine." Empress Dowager is right. Prince Li nodded and praised. Wang Ji said, "Empress Dowager and Prince Li, please make a decision quickly. Long delays have many dreams." The Empress Dowager slowly nodded and looked at Marquis Qingyang with trust. However, Marquis Qingyang felt the hairs on his back stand up. "Empress Dowager, if the Tiger army goes to the north, what will happen around the capital?" Marquis Qingyang cupped his hands and said, "If someone dares to come around the capital, we won't be able to protect them." Chapter 6:12. Wang Ji's words were very straightforward, and everyone understood. If there was a day when they needed to use the troops around the capital to protect the capital, then wouldn't the Taytan's iron hooves trample on the capital? Yujin Khan was a war god on the same level as Pang Xiao and Ji Zhayu. Without Pang Xiao and Ji Zhayu as commanders, the people in the capital would not be a match for the Taytan. Prince Li lowered his head, not daring to let others see the emotions in his eyes. The Empress Dowager was slightly dissatisfied. She felt that Marquis Qingyang's words were degrading the Empress Dowager's Ju family, and that he was not worthy of her promotion. Marquis Qingyang realized that he had misspoken. He suppressed the fear in his heart and said with his head held high, "I only said this for the safety of the Empress Dowager and the people. As for myself, of course I'm willing to go into battle. A general has to fight on the battlefield. Only by killing the enemy can one be carefree." The Empress Dowager's expression finally relaxed. She smiled and nodded, "It's good that you have such determination. Since that's the case, I'll leave the matter of Heaven's Gate to you and Sir Wang to discuss." Wang Ji cupped her hands and said loudly, "Yes, Empress Dowager." Marquis Qingyang's heart was beating like a drum, but he also bowed, "Yes, Empress Dowager." The Empress Dowager nodded. Now that the matter in the north was settled, she relaxed a little and a smile appeared on her face. Marquis Qingyang saw that the Empress Dowager's mood had improved, so he smiled and comforted her, "Don't worry, Empress Dowager. The Dragon Legion retreating to Heaven's Gate is definitely a temporary measure. It's just that the Titan came too suddenly and they were not prepared. The Dragon Legion led by Prince Consort Ji has fought for many years and is an army that has experienced hundreds of battles. I believe that as long as they regroup, the Dragon Legion will be able to chase the Titan out of our territory." The Empress Dowager could not help but smile and nod. Her son-in-law's personality was not likable, and he was cold and did not know how to care for others. He often angered Anyang to the point that he came to the palace to complain. However, his ability to lead troops could not be ignored. She believed that he would be able to lead them out. The Dragon Legion were not useless people, and there was no reason for them to let the Titan enter Heaven's Gate so easily. The Empress Dowager felt more at ease. After all, Daeju had only been established for 5 years. The soldiers who had conquered the world were still hot-blooded. If they were released, they would definitely howl and bite the enemy like hungry wolves. The Empress Dowager was confident in this aspect. The Minister of War, Wang Ji, cast a sidelong glance at the Marquis of Qingyang, almost unable to suppress the contempt in his heart. It seemed that he had still underestimated the Marquis of Qingyang. Who said that he only knew how to indulge in debauchery? This person's bootlicking skills were not bad either. Thinking of Your Majesty, whose life and death were still unknown, Wang Ji couldn't help but worry. Even if there was no turmoil in the court and Your Majesty presided over the situation, such a dangerous situation would not be easily resolved. What's more, the Empress Dowager was a woman without any political sense, and a weak and incompetent royal prince. These people were really crazy about power. Wang Ji had no interest in flattering the Empress Dowager, so she bowed and excused herself. Before leaving the hall, he didn't forget to call out to the Marquis of Qingyang, "Marquis, would you like to travel with me?" However, the Empress Dowager smiled and said, "Ijia still has matters to discuss with the Marquis of Qingyang." Wang Ji complied, bowed, and retreated. Seeing this, Prince Li also bowed and excused himself. The Empress Dowager nodded her head in a dignified manner. After the outsiders left, she called the Marquis of Qingyang to her with a serious expression. "Da Yong. Today, Ijia has given you all the power that can be given to you. You have to work hard and fight for Ijia's honor, as well as our Ju family's honor. Although we normally live well, others say that the Emperor is benevolent and filial, which is why our Ju family is where it is today. Although Ijia also knows that the Emperor is filial, how is our Ju family lacking compared to anyone?" Hearing the Empress Dowager directly call him little, the Marquis of Qingyang also affectionately called out, "Jejie." Sitting sideways next to the Empress Dowager, he solemnly vowed, "Your Majesty is indeed not unkind to our family and is sufficiently filial to Jejie. However, I am not just a decoration in the military. It's not that I don't have any ability and can only rely on Your Majesty's face to act. Jejie, don't worry this time. I will definitely think of a way to stabilize our country and won't let others say that Jejie was biased in making me the commander of the Tiger Army." Hearing this, the Empress Dowager nodded her head in satisfaction. That is exactly what Ijia meant. You are Ijia's younger brother. Each of your actions represents Ijia. You have to work hard and let Ijia's face shine. Jejie, don't worry. The Marquis of Qingyang said with a clear laugh, that Pang Zhishi is only being praised by outsiders. What ability can a young brat have? In the past, you and your brother didn't have a chance. Now that you have given me such a good opportunity, of course I will properly grasp it. The Empress Dowager nodded her head in satisfaction. However, at this time, a middle-ranking official suddenly came in from outside the hall. "Empress Dowager, Sir Wang of the Ministry of War requests an audience. Didn't you just leave? What is it now?" The Empress Dowager's heart skipped a beat and her face turned pale with fright. After calling Wang Ji in, she saw that Wang Zhi's expression was even worse than before. Empress Dowager, the Yongning Prefecture, Hangzhou Prefecture, and Zhenyang Prefecture in the south have declared independence and are in agreement with Southern Yang. Southern Yang's Emperor Yuqi Shujie has abdicated and is supporting the former Yang dynasty's Emperor Yuqi Yang to regain the throne. At this point, Wang Zhi's expression was ashen. She said with a trembling voice, "Empress Dowager, the south is also in chaos. Those ministers who escaped from the Yang dynasty must have planned this beforehand. Now, they are bringing their families to seek refuge with their former emperor." The Empress Dowager's mind buzzed and she could no longer maintain her composure. The matters in the north had not been resolved and the south was also in chaos. Could it be that the Taitan and the Yang dynasty had made an agreement? The Empress Dowager looked at Wang Zhi for help and then looked at her trusted younger brother. She anxiously said, "What should we do?" The Marquis of Qingyang's expression was even worse than the Empress Dowager's. He had a headache when he thought about mobilizing troops against the Taitan. He didn't expect the Yang dynasty to be reinstated. If the two sides attacked him, what should he do? "Don't worry, Empress Dowager. The south will not be able to do anything. The Yuqi Yang are cowards. Even if the three prefectures near Southern Yang cooperate with them, a small place like Southern Yang is nothing to be afraid of." Marquis Qingyang said in a clear voice, "I feel that the greatest danger of Southern Yang is not in war but in people's hearts." People's hearts? The Empress Dowager calmed down a little. Marquis Qingyang said, "Empress Dowager, the ministers that escaped from the Yang dynasty must have returned to the Yuqi Yang. There are still many of them who haven't left. These people are in the capital and might be trying to get information from us." When the Empress Dowager heard this, she slapped her thigh. "Isn't that right? Go, investigate the remnants of the Yang dynasty. Capture them all and interrogate them. You must interrogate them and find out what the Yang dynasty is trying to do." "Yes." Marquis Qingyang accepted the order. Wang Zhi looked at Marquis Qingyang and despised him even more. Be it Pang Xiao or Ji Zhayu, he was willing to accept them as the commander of the Tiger Army. However, Wang Zhi hated people like Marquis Qingyang who only knew how to suck up and not be of use at the crucial moment. However, the Empress Dowager's intention to take power was so obvious. With his position, he could not change the decision of the higher-ups. Wang Zhi only hoped that Your Majesty could be saved. If the emperor could not be saved, and there was no one in the imperial court who could take up the responsibility to turn the tide, the great Zhou dynasty would be in danger. With such two huge things happening in the imperial court, it was impossible to hide it. The Dragon Legion Corps in the north lost 3 passes and retreated to Heaven's Gate to wait for reinforcements. The Yang dynasty in the south revived, and the 3 prefectures and Southern Yang supported the Yuqi Yang to regain their position. Once the south acted, Daju would be attacked from 2 sides. When Qin Yining and his father heard this news, they were both silent. For the Yang dynasty to disappear in one night, they must have discussed this beforehand. However, as the head of the Yang dynasty, they did not reveal anything to Qin Huayuan. He did not know that the Yuqi Yang had escaped. He also did not know that the surrendered officials had returned. Qin Huayuan's heart was filled with mixed feelings after being marginalized and concealed like this. Qin Yining consoled Qin Huayuan, "Father, it is good that we did not tell you about this. If they really found you, you would have to make a choice. Wouldn't that be a problem? It is better this way. You are no longer an official, and our family just wants to live together freely. It does not matter if they find us or not. Don't you think so?" Qin Huayuan smiled and nodded. "You are right. Right now, all I want is for Jishi to return home safely and for you to give birth to Lin. I do not care about the chaos in the court. In the future, when I am old, I might want to return home and take a look. Or I might even live there. After all, our family's manor was in the south. As for the rest, I do not care." Qin Yining saw that Qin Huayuan was sincere and was not trying to comfort her. Only then did she relax. "Princess." Shen Yun's slightly anxious voice came from the door. A group of people came from outside the manor. The leader is a middle-ranking official. He said that he wants to invite the old master out. He has something to ask. Qin Yining and Qin Huayuan looked at each other, and they both had their own thoughts. Qin Yining said, "Did I hear where these people came from? Are they from Yangshan Palace Hall or Xi'an Palace? I do not know." However, the middle-ranking official also brought the Jinwu guards from the palace. It seems that they did not come with good intentions. Qin Huayuan said, "It must be because of the Southern Yang incident. Not all of the surrendered officials from the Yang dynasty left. Those people were probably arrested and detained." Qin Yining stood up and slammed the table. "They have a good idea. They want to arrest people in my manner. Let's see if they have the ability." Qin Yining was burning with anger, and he ordered, "Gather all the Jinghu Wei. Accompany me outside to take a look. I want to see what they are going to ask my father." Xianyun nodded and quickly went to give the order. Ji Yun and Bing Tang helped Qin Yining change into outdoor shoes. Worried that she would catch a cold after the rain, they also took out a lotus-colored Ruyi jacket and put it on her shoulders. Qin Huayuan stood up helplessly and ordered someone to support him. "Father will go with you. Don't be too angry, it is not good for your health. Father will tell them when the time comes." Chapter 6:13. The swelling on Qin Huayuan's foot had subsided a bit, but she still walked with a slight limp. Qin Yining was worried that Qin Huayuan's foot injury was serious, so she ordered someone to prepare a stretcher for Qin Huayuan. She sat on the other stretcher and was carried to the front of the Fu by a sturdy older female servant. Xie Yu and Shu Weiji were already waiting at the Yi gate. Both of their faces were filled with anxiety, and their brows were tightly knitted together. Ever since Pang Xiao went to Mount Chuang, he hadn't returned. The two were so anxious that their hair had turned white. Now that they saw someone blocking their door, it was clear that they were bullying them because Wang Yi wasn't home. The two wanted nothing more than to raise their swords and fight to the death with the people outside. Seeing Qin Yining and Qin Huayuan come out, the two came forward to greet them. Qin Yining got off the stretcher and nodded to Xie Yu and Shu Weiji. "Thank you, Sir Shu. Princess Consort." The people outside should have been arranged by the Empress Dowager. Although the one who spoke was a mid-ranking official, the Marquis of Qingyang was also among them. "You have to be careful not to hurt yourself." Qin Yining nodded and smiled as she comforted the two loyal and devoted elders. "Don't worry, I know what to do. I definitely won't hurt myself." Qin Yining had arranged for Jinghu Wei to go to the mountains, so there were only a dozen or so people left at home. However, with the addition of Jing Zhe and the others, as well as the ordinary bodyguards, although there weren't many people, their fighting strength wasn't weak. Qin Yining said, "Open the side door. Tell them that I'm here to ask about their situation." "Yes." The doorman opened the side door and said to the people outside, "Our princess consort has arrived. If you have any questions, you can ask them now." Qin Yining supported a servant girl to the door. As soon as she raised her eyes, she saw a greasy round face and a pair of malicious eyes sizing her up. This was the Marquis of Qingyang, the Empress Dowager's youngest brother, Zhu Deong. Qin Yining held his waist as he descended the red steps. He smiled and said, "So it was the Marquis of Qingyang who came in person? Just now, I heard that the person who asked the question was a middle-ranking official. I thought that there was something else in the palace that needed to be instructed. Since the Marquis of Qingyang has personally come, we should all enter the manor to have a cup of tea. Would the Marquis do us the honor?" The Marquis of Qingyang narrowed his eyes as he watched Qin Yining. His eyes were filled with admiration and envy. Even though the woman in front of him was pregnant and had a swollen figure, it did not conceal her charm. That guy with the surname, she really had luck with women. "Your Highness, you're too polite." Marquis Qingyang coughed, then looked sternly at Qin Huayuan behind her. "We have come under orders to ask Sir Qin to make a trip." As soon as he finished speaking, he waved at the people behind him. The Jinwu guards behind him immediately went forward to apprehend him. Qin Yining stood at the very front, unwilling to back down. Jing Zhe and the other people beside her, as well as the Jinghu Wei guards, had already formed a semicircle around Qin Huayuan to protect him. They tightly surrounded the front of the manor. "Wait." Qin Yining sneered. You have come under the Empress Dowager's orders. What proof do you have? My father has already retired from his post and has not even taken half a step out of the manor. What could he know? Moreover, this is the Prince Zhengxian's manor. Wang Yi and your majesty are still buried in the underground palace. You don't want to save them, but instead come to the manor to bully Wang Yi's family. What are your intentions? Apparently not expecting Qin Yining to be so eloquent, the Marquis of Qingyang was momentarily stunned. Qin Yining did not give him a chance to speak. My father is no longer an official of the imperial court. If you want to invite someone, you have to give me a reason. Even if it is the Empress Dowager's orders, I will only believe it if the Empress Dowager sends an imperial edict. Otherwise, I will suspect that you are Taytan spies who came specifically to sow discord between a meritorious official and your majesty. You woman. The Marquis of Qingyang came back to his senses and pointed at Qin Yining. You ungrateful thing. Your father is a traitor. The Empress Dowager is already giving him face by having this Marquis bring the Jinwu guards to arrest you. If you dare to disobey, then try it. Hearing the Marquis of Qingyang's crude words, the people of the manor all frowned. Jing Zhe, Da Han, and the others were already so angry that their brows were furrowed and the swords in their hands were half drawn. Jinghu Wei mixed in with the manor soldiers, each of them so angry that their faces were flushed red. Qin Huayuan came forward and coldly swept his eyes over the Marquis of Qingyang. Marquis of Qingyang. For better or worse, you come from a prestigious family and bring the Empress Dowager's face outside. How can you speak so rudely? If I have committed any crime, you can just bring the evidence to arrest me. In short, if you want to bring me over without knowing the reason, I will definitely not agree. The imperial court is currently in troubled times, yet you bring people to block the door of a meritorious official to arrest him. Are you not afraid that the other officials will be bitterly disappointed if they find out? Qin Huayuan had served in the imperial court for many years, so his aura was naturally not something a normal person could compare to. He knew how to speak and what tone to use to create a deterrent effect. He only spoke calmly, but in the ears of the Marquis of Qingyang and the others, it had a different effect. The Marquis of Qingyang's face was completely red. He was the Empress Dowager's younger brother. Who didn't give him face outside? He didn't expect to stumble here. Moreover, he stumbled in front of a civil official who had already been removed from his position. The Marquis of Qingyang almost lost face. If he didn't perform well today, how would he establish his prestige in the future? Less nonsense. The Marquis of Qingyang roared. He turned around and ordered the Jinwu guards behind him, arrest them. Whoever resists will be arrested as well. Hurry up. Yes. The Jinwu guards behind him responded. One of the leaders said hesitantly, Marquis, the Prince Zhengxian's consort is also. Are you stupid? The Marquis of Qingyang fiercely glared at that person. The Jinwu guards were all chosen from noble sons. With their status, they were existences that others would have to bow their heads and bend their backs when they went out. Now that they were being reprimanded by the Marquis of Qingyang, all of them felt very indignant. However, the Empress Dowager had ordered them and they had no other choice. Everyone rushed forward to arrest Qin Huayuan, but everyone tacitly circled around Qin Yining. They even stayed far away from her for fear of bumping into her. How could Qin Yining be willing to watch his father be arrested? He immediately anxiously ordered the guards to escort Qin Huayuan into the estate. The Jinwu guards immediately became anxious when they saw that Qin Huayuan was about to be escorted into the estate. Although they obeyed orders to capture Qin Huayuan, they didn't have the guts to barge into the estate of the war god Wang Yi. Thus, they took advantage of the fact that Qin Huayuan was still there. Before she entered the estate, they mustered all their strength to capture her, so they were a bit heavy-handed. The Jinghu guards were completely anxious when they saw this. They rolled up their sleeves and were about to fight with their lives on the line. An uncontrollable dispute was on the verge of erupting. However, at this moment, they suddenly heard a burst of hurried footsteps rapidly approaching. A group of about 50 people wearing bright red battle clothes suddenly cut across, driving the Marquis of Qingyang and the Jinwu guards he brought over one zhong away. The leader said in a deep voice, We are here to protect the estate under the orders of the Marquis of North Placating. No one is allowed to act impudently in the estate. Chapter 614. If the Empress Dowager wanted to arrest someone, why didn't she issue a decree? As a relative of the Empress Dowager, Marquis Qingyang shouldn't forget the lessons of history and do things that shouldn't be done. Qin Yining was grateful for Ji Ziyu's arrangements. His men had arrived in such a timely manner because of Ji Ziyu's careful arrangements. Now that she had a helper, she was even more confident. Marquis Qingyang's face was ashen from anger. He brandished his fists and rushed forward, wanting to punch and kick Qin Yining. Qin Yining inwardly mocked him for being an idiot. He just looked at Marquis Qingyang coldly and mockingly. The people around him had already rushed forward. Jinghu Wei's men protected Qin Yining behind them. Ji Ziyu's men were even more swift and decisive. They rushed forward and restrained Marquis Qingyang's arms behind his back. Marquis Qingyang's cheeks were pressed against the ground. His face was red as he struggled. "Let go. You bunch of daring fanatics. I'll have the Empress Dowager chop off your dog heads. Let go." Ji Ziyu's trusted men didn't seem to be afraid at all. Instead, they pressed the Marquis to the ground even harder, not giving Marquis Qingyang the slightest chance to attack. The Jinghu guards behind Marquis Qingyang looked at each other in dismay. They didn't know if they should come forward to rescue him. They could see that the people in front of them were all from the border army. It wouldn't be difficult for each of them to fight against 10 people. The Jinghu guards were like tigers in a cage. They would suffer when faced with a wild wolf that roared with all its might. Qin Yining saw that Ji Ziyu's men acted in the same way as Jinghu Wei and had an idea. He smiled at the leader and said, "This general, let him go. Marquis Qingyang is a proud and precious man. I'm afraid he won't be able to endure." Using the words proud and precious man to describe the current commander of the Tiger Army was already a great irony. Jinghu Wei and the others beside him burst into laughter. The leader smiled and waved his hand, instructing his men to release Marquis Qingyang. He then cupped his hands in greeting to Qin Yining. "This humble one is Lin Hongyu." After introducing himself, he turned around and said to Marquis Qingyang, who was struggling to get up, "My Marquis Dingbei has ordered us to protect the safety of Prince Zhongxian's residence. Regardless of whether Marquis Qingyang is acting out of selfishness or for other reasons, please return." "Sure. I think you're trying to rebel." The Marquis of Qingyang wiped the dust from his face and pointed at Qin Yining, but he did not dare to continue forward. Ji Ziyu himself was a lunatic, and his subordinates were also crazy enough to not even care about the Empress Dowager. He was worried that this group of boors would directly kill him. When that time came, he would already be dead. Even if he had the Empress Dowager's support, it would be useless. Lin Hongyu was a veteran of the battlefield and had seen many different kinds of people. Seeing the expression on the Marquis of Qingyang's face, he knew that this person had definitely admitted defeat. While mocking him in his heart, he also quietly breathed a sigh of relief. If the Marquis of Qingyang was a forceful person, they would probably have to fight to the death. Now, it was even better to scare them off like this and save them a lot of trouble. Everyone turned a deaf ear to the Marquis of Qingyang's clamor. Seeing this, Qin Yining also felt that there was no point in arguing with the Marquis of Qingyang, so he ordered, "Return to the residence and close the door." The 50 or so imperial bodyguards and soldiers that Lin Hongyu had brought with him complied and followed the Jinghu Wei's people into the residence. Being ignored like this, the Marquis of Qingyang was so angry that he stomped his feet. However, he did not have the courage to challenge Ji Ziyu's people. Seeing the doors of the residence being closed, the Marquis of Qingyang coldly snorted, "Return to the palace. I want to see the Empress Dowager." The eunuchs and Jinghu guards who had come with him looked at the Marquis of Qingyang like they were looking at a coward who had fled in the face of battle. Outside the door, the bodyguards were certain that the Jinghu guards had left before letting out a sigh of relief. Qin Yining led his men to forcefully drive away the intruders. However, the Marquis of Qingyang must have gone to complain to the Empress Dowager. She was worried that the Empress Dowager would harm her father and became somewhat worried. At this time, Qin Huayuan had already thanked Lin Hongyu and the others. He sighed and said, "A friend in need is a friend indeed. We will always remember Marquis Dingbei's kindness." Lin Hongyu hurriedly smiled and bowed, saying, "Old Sir Qin, there is no need for this. To tell you the truth, the day after the incident on the mountain, Marquis Dingbei had arranged for us to be near the residence. The Marquis was worried that someone would take advantage of the situation and harm the residents. As a result, we ran into the Marquis of Qingyang's people today." Qin Yining and Qin Huayuan looked at each other in surprise. They did not expect that Ji Zheyu, who looked so cold, would actually be so meticulous in his actions. Although the residence had already been set up. But the people that Ji Zheyu had arranged were truly of great help. Not only did they provide protection, but they also shouldered all the blame. Qin Yining made up his mind, thinking that he must properly thank Ji Zheyu when he returned. As for the Marquis of Qingyang, he wanted to return to the palace and complain to the Empress Dowager, but he was stopped halfway by the Minister of War, Wang Zhi. Wang Zhi originally looked down on people like the Marquis of Qingyang, so she told the Marquis of Qingyang about the war, wanting to see the Marquis of Qingyang's cowardice. The Marquis of Qingyang did not disappoint Wang Zhi. He was so scared that his face turned pale and bloodless, and his lips trembled. The Taitan people were so fierce and cruel that the Marquis of Qingyang was afraid that he would be caught and eaten. He also promised the Empress Dowager that he would increase the number of troops at Heaven's Gate. But looking at it now, if he did not go up against the Taitan Yujin Han, what else could it be other than throwing his life away? The Marquis of Qingyang was very satisfied with his current life of luxury and did not want to throw his life away for such a thing. Therefore, after parting ways with Wang Zhi, the Marquis of Qingyang cleverly thought of a way to solve the problem. Percent in Xi'an Palace, the Empress Dowager was waiting for news, but what she received was an eunuch who came to reply. Replying to the Empress Dowager, the Marquis of Qingyang went to Prince Zhongshuan's residence today to capture Qin Meng. In the end, he was angered by the Prince Zhongshuan's consort. He originally wanted to forcefully capture her, but the guards arranged by Prince Consort Ji were very tough and actually injured the Marquis of Qingyang. At this time, the Marquis is so angry that he has a headache. He can't even stand properly and has already returned to the Marquis's residence to rest. The Marquis said to ask the Empress Dowager to calm down. When he is better, he will immediately go to the Prince Zhongshuan's residence. The eunuch learned the truth from the Marquis of Qingyang's words and then lowered his head in silence. The Empress Dowager was so angry that the veins on her forehead were popping out. Ji Zheyu's people were actually arranged to go to the Prince Zhongshuan's residence. Ji Zheyu was clearly treating her as an outsider and distancing herself from them. She was the Empress Dowager, and no one listened to the Empress Dowager's verbal orders. Could it be that the world was going to rebel? Good. Ijia will wait. Tomorrow, when the Marquis of Qingyang enters the palace, I will immediately have him capture Qin Meng. The Empress Dowager was sulking when she fell asleep that night. As a result, something even angrier came the next day. The Marquis of Qingyang's heart was attacked by anger and is seriously ill in bed. It must be inconvenient for him to go out. The Marquis of Qingyang also said that the Taitan war in the north is critical and the Tiger Army urgently needs to reinforce the north. He hopes that the Empress Dowager can find a suitable candidate as soon as possible. The steward of the Prince Zhongshuan left after replying. The Empress Dowager's face was ashen with anger. If it wasn't for the fact that she wanted to maintain her composure next to the regent Prince Li, she probably would have already started cursing. Chapter 615. The Empress Dowager's expression was extremely unsightly. Prince Li was Li Qitian's younger cousin, and the Marquis of Qingyang was her younger brother. The Empress Dowager felt she had lost face for her maternal family to perform so poorly in front of her husband's family. Prince Li still had his gentle and timid appearance. His eyes were half closed, and he softly explained, "Empress Dowager doesn't need to worry. The Marquis of Qingyang is a hero on the battlefield. His temperament has always been like a raging fire. How could he endure encountering such a scoundrel who is good at talking? It's possible to fall ill from anger. The Empress Dowager felt that the Marquis of Qingyang's current actions were suspicious of shirking responsibility. But in front of Prince Li, she still had to take care of her face. The Empress Dowager was very satisfied that Prince Li was so tactful. She felt that it was a wise choice for her to choose Prince Li to be the regent of the state. Prince Li's temperament was weak, and he was a puppet that was easy to control. And she handed over the Tiger Army to her own family. This way, the state and military power were firmly in her hands. If the emperor was unharmed, then that would be good. When he returned, she would naturally hand over power. But if something happened to the emperor, she wouldn't be too passive. All power would be in her hands, or at least she wouldn't be controlled by the ministers of the court. The Empress Dowager thought of her recent decisions and couldn't help but be immensely pleased with herself. She found Prince Li even more pleasing to the eye. "Ijia didn't misjudge you. You really are a virtuous talent who knows when to advance and when to retreat." Prince Li was flattered by the praise and quickly stood up to return the courtesy. "The Empress Dowager praises me too much. I don't have your Majesty's talents. Right now, I'm only following the Empress Dowager's orders and doing what I can. I don't have any other talents, but I'm obedient." The Empress Dowager thought to herself, "It's good that you're obedient." But on the surface, she smiled and praised Prince Li again. She kept Prince Li for lunch and rewarded him with snacks and fruit before letting him leave. Prince Li left Xi'an Palace and took a small sedan chair out of the palace without any obstructions. Arriving at the palace gates, he boarded his own carriage and returned to his residence in the capital. As soon as he entered the main entrance, he saw a middle-aged scholar wearing a blue robe and a square headscarf on his head. The scholar greeted him with a smile. He was Prince Li's advisor. His name was Dai Chun, and his courtesy name was Jinan. Wang Yi. Dai Chun came forward and bowed. "Mr. Dai." Prince Li smiled gently. "Mr. Dai, why are you standing here?" "I'm waiting for the Duke's return." "Oh. Is there something you need, sir?" "Exactly." Prince Li smiled and said, "Why don't we move to the study to talk?" Dai Chun smiled and nodded. This student has the same intention. When the two of them arrived at the study, Prince Li dismissed the servants. He then lifted the hem of his robe and casually sat down on a round-backed chair. His expression naturally carried a bit of arrogance. Compared to when he was in front of the Empress Dowager, he was like a completely different person. Dai Chun stood below and cupped his hands in greeting. "Did you gain anything from your trip to the palace today?" When Prince Li heard this, he actually burst out laughing. Thinking of how the Empress Dowager had clearly been angered to the point of fainting by the Marquis of Qingyang, yet she still had to pretend to be calm and find a way out for herself, Prince Li laughed even more heartily and loudly. Seeing this, Dai Chun could already somewhat guess the situation. Allow this student to guess, could it be that the Marquis of Qingyang has caused some trouble again? That's right. Prince Li smiled and shook his head, praising, Sir's plan at the time was truly good. Regardless of whether it was the Marquis of Qingyang or that old man vainly trying to seize power, they were both equally stupid. One overestimated his abilities, while the other treated everyone in his family as a treasure. At the time, listening to Sir's words and recommending the Marquis of Qingyang to the Empress Dowager as the commander-in-chief of the Tiger Army was truly killing several birds with one stone. Dai Chun smiled and shook his head. The Duke is too kind. The original idea wasn't a student's, but the Duke's own foresight. Currently, the Dragon Stallion army is urgently waiting for rescue at Heaven's Gate, but the Marquis of Qingyang is suddenly afraid. If this news spreads, not only will he lose face, but even the Empress Dowager will be angered. At that time, you can take advantage of the fact that everyone is looking down on the Marquis of Qingyang's desertion to personally take over this authority. That would be perfectly justified. Prince Li put away the smile on his face, shaking his head. This idea is very good. I also feel that it's feasible. However, I'm afraid that a long dream will bring many changes. That old woman, the Empress Dowager, is greedy in her heart. It's not like she only has one idiotic younger brother. There are still so many nephews with the surname Ju. I'm afraid that when the time comes, this authority still won't belong to me. Prince Li stood up, pacing to the window with his hands behind his back. Now is the perfect opportunity to gain a firm foothold. If your majesty is truly found, the authority in my hands will still not be stable. At that time, I might have to face your majesty's reckoning. I know your majesty's personality better than anyone else. Dai Chun also said seriously, the duke doesn't need to worry. Although Prince Consort Ji's men are keeping a tight watch on Mount Shuangshan, doesn't a tiger also have times when it takes a nap? We just need to keep an eye on that place. If we discover someone who shouldn't have appeared, we can just order people to take care of them. We definitely can't let your efforts go to waste because of this. Commandery Prince Li nodded and said, in my opinion, it's better to burn down the mountain. Duke, burning the mountain is not appropriate. There are still so many people that Prince Consort Ji brought to dig it up. If this Mount Shuangshan is wiped out, the people outside will inevitably criticize this as someone setting the fire to murder your majesty. How can this be considered murder? Who knows if he's still alive or not? Perhaps this isn't murder, but rather helping to cremate him. Dai Chun said with a smile, Wang Yi is right. However, we still need to be cautious right now. Right now we can't let the Empress Dowager become suspicious. When you can stabilize your position as Prince Regent, there will be many things we can do. Prince Li nodded. His hands supported the armrests on both sides of the chair as he let out a long breath. He said carefree, Li Chitian and I are brothers of the same clan. There's no reason why I can't be the emperor if he can. How much worse am I compared to him? This throne is surnamed Li, but the Empress Dowager wants to get it into the hands of someone surnamed Ju? She's really overestimating herself. Dai Chun nodded in agreement. Prince Li outlined his future in his mind and his smile became even more confident. If the Empress Dowager saw this appearance of Prince Li, she probably wouldn't be at ease handing over the regent power to him. However, Prince Li hid it too deeply in front of outsiders. Marquis Qingyang claimed to be ill and didn't attend court. The Empress Dowager was angry and sent people to visit the Marquis Fu for 3 consecutive days, but Marquis Qingyang was still bedridden. The Empress Dowager was so angry that she personally left the palace to see Marquis Qingyang, who knew that Marquis Qingyang said something to the Empress Dowager. When the Empress Dowager returned, she called for the Minister of War, Wang Ji. Right now, Marquis Qingyang's health isn't any better. Chapter 616. Wang Ji saw that the Empress Dowager was going back on her words. When she made such a request, she felt that it was not worth it for Ji Zheyu. If she knew that Marquis Qingyang was useless, the Empress Dowager would have focused all her efforts on her family. Not only did this hurt Ji Zheyu, but it also hurt the Empress Dowager. It also made the other officials feel sorry for the loss of the rabbit. That was why the court could not be controlled by this ignorant woman. If this continued, it would be chaotic sooner or later. Wang Ji suppressed the dissatisfaction in her heart and said helplessly, the Empress Dowager is wise. However, Prince Consort Ji is stubborn and may not agree. The Empress Dowager glared, he dares. Does he want to rebel? Wang Ji lowered her head in silence. Everyone knew what Ji Ziyu's personality was like. There was no need to explain it in detail. After the Empress Dowager lost her temper, she thought about how Ji Ziyu didn't even pay attention to the current dynasty's princess royal and how he didn't even know how to curry favor with such a noble mother-in-law. She couldn't help but feel a splitting headache. Why did this kind of latrine stone have to be her son-in-law? Just go. If he has any objections, tell him to come find Ijia. Wang Ji said in a low voice, yes. Then, she helplessly went to Mount Chuang. However, just as Wang Ji expected, Ji Zheyu only touched the dust on his face after hearing Wang Ji's words, I'll have to trouble official Wang to tell the Empress Dowager that I won't do it. He turned around and picked up a shovel and continued to dig. Wang Ji looked at the people digging up the mountain in full swing. She realized that there was no one from the Imperial Guards among them. Looking at their attire, they were all Ji Ziyu's men. Her heart couldn't help but skip a beat. Suppressing the strange feeling in her lower body, Wang Ji had no choice but to move closer to Ji Zheyu. She earnestly advised Ji Zheyu, who was waving his shovel, Prince Consort Ji, for the sake of the country, for the sake of the common people, you can't just let go. The Tiger Army's 100,000 soldiers are now without a leader. The Dragon Stallion Army has retreated to Heaven's Gate and is anxiously waiting for Seng Bing's help. Ji Ziyu's hands did not stop moving as he said, I am no longer the commander of the Tiger Army. Isn't the current commander of the Tiger Army Marquis Qingyang? The Empress Dowager can instruct the Marquis of Qingyang to go. The Marquis of Qingyang fell ill. We can't go to war. Is that so? Ji Ziyu said faintly as he dug out another shovel of soil. Wang Ji understood Ji Ziyu's anger and said helplessly, I understand that Prince Consort Ji is upset, but, Lord Wang, you must be joking. My heart is not unsettled. Right now, I just want to save your majesty. I don't want to think about anything else. I have listened to the Empress Dowager's verbal order once. Now, I am no longer an official. I am just a small marquis, an unremarkable son-in-law. I know that I'm not capable enough to take on the role of the Tiger Army's commander-in-chief. You're the one who's joking. With your talent, if you can't be the commander of the Tiger Army, who else can? The Marquis of Qingyang can. Ji Ziyu stabbed the shovel into the ground and turned around. I know what Lord Wang means, but I really have no interest in this matter. Lord Wang, please go back to the Empress Dowager. There are many talented people in the Empress Dowager's family. If the Marquis of Qingyang can't do it, isn't there someone else? Even a clay figurine has a clay figurine, not to mention Ji Ziyu. Although he was taciturn and cold as if he didn't care about anything, the Empress Dowager's actions were too hurtful. At this time, if Ji Ziyu saw that power had been placed in front of him and reached out to take it, it would be different from how he usually did things. Moreover, he hasn't given up on saving your majesty. He's loyally guarding the last hope. Even if he only has the Fu soldiers by his side, he's still digging. Wang Ji admired such a loyal person. Wang Ji didn't continue to persuade him. She only greeted Ji Ziyu and thanked him for his hard work, then went back to report to the Empress Dowager. As for Ji Ziyu, he put aside the trivial matters and continued to dig. He led his men and worked tirelessly to dig. So many days had passed. He didn't know if the people buried underground were still alive, but as long as there was a glimmer of hope, he couldn't give up. If he was alive, he wanted to see him. If he was dead, he wanted to see the corpse. If he gave up even then, it was even more impossible for Qin Yining, who was just a woman, to organize people to save people. When the time came, wouldn't they completely leave the people underground to fend for themselves? When the Empress Dowager learned that Ji Ziyu still refused to be the commander of the Tiger Army, she was so angry that she smashed her teacup on the spot. Just as Li Helan entered the palace, the Empress Dowager couldn't vent her anger. The Empress Dowager had nowhere to vent her anger. She grabbed Li Helan and scolded her harshly. First, she said that Li Helan couldn't win the Emperor's son-in-law's heart. Then, she reprimanded Li Helan for acting so absurdly that Ji Ziyu was deeply hurt. Li Helan's face turned red from the scolding. He angrily retorted, Imperial Mother only knows how to scold me. How beautiful are you? The position of the commander of the Tiger Army was conferred by Imperial Brother. You took it just because you said so. How could it be given to an ignorant and incompetent person like my uncle? It would be strange if the Emperor's son-in-law wasn't angry. You didn't say anything when you didn't do it properly. Instead, you scolded me. It's ridiculous. After saying this, Li Helan wiped his tears and ran away. The Empress Dowager was so angry that her chest violently heaved up and down. Even flipping the tea table in front of her wasn't enough to vent her anger. In the end, it was her family who refused to fight for her. They let her be looked down upon outside. The Empress Dowager was angry and ordered the palace servants, go to Marquis Qingyang's Fu and tell Marquis Qingyang that Zeng's army can't be delayed. Tell him to hurry and go to Tianmen Pass. Qin Yining naturally didn't know about this entanglement. She rested in the Fu for 2 days and then began to travel between Chong Mountain and the capital with a group of imperial bodyguards every day. She often got up before the sun rose and sat in Chong Mountain for an entire day. When the sun set, she would be sent back to the Fu by Jinghu Wei and Jingzhe. Qin Yining was doing this for the sake of the child in her belly. Otherwise, she really hated that she couldn't be like Ji Zheyu and never leave. However, as time passed, Qin Yining and Ji Zheyu became more and more anxious. Prince Li had already withdrawn the majority of the imperial guards because they had missed the best time. The small portion that was left was only for show during the day. The people had been buried in the underground palace for so long. According to Prince Li's intentions, they were no longer rescuing people, but searching for corpses. Since they were searching for corpses, there was no need to be anxious. However, Qin Yining was anxious, and so was Ji Zheyu. The Fu was protected by Ji Zheyu's men, so Qin Yining simply mobilized all of the Jinghu Wei to the mountain and listened to Ji Zheyu's arrangements. It was now the 29th of the 9th month. 20 days had passed since the incident. In the evening, the setting sun was as red as blood. Qin Yining's dry eyes were filled with despair, but she couldn't cry even if she wanted to. As usual, Ji Zheyu had people send her down the mountain and back to the Fu. Who knew that as soon as Qin Yining entered the Fu, before she could even get out of the carriage, a group of people ran over. The rider on the horse was covered in dirt. Qin Yining recognized that it was one of the Pang Xiao and Jinghu Wei. Princess consort. Jinghu Wei's eyes lit up. He lowered his voice and said excitedly, "There's movement on the mountain." "What? Is this true?" Qin Yining was so excited that she almost cried out. Jinghu Wei nodded repeatedly. Prince Consort Ji said that he heard a response, but it was blocked by a rock. "I'm afraid that they won't be able to dig it out in a short time. Princess Consort, do you want to go back to the mountain?" Chapter 617. Qin Yining urged the driver along the way. She was so anxious that she could not care about anything else. Her hands tightly gripped the window frame and the cushion. Fine beads of sweat appeared on her forehead. She could not calm down at all. She heard a voice. Could it be Pang Xiao? What if Li Qitian harmed Pang Xiao underground? What if Pang Xiao had already died and only Li Qitian was found? Bing Tang helped her wipe her sweat with a handkerchief. He squeezed her hand a little harder. "Wang Fei, calm down. Wang Yi must be saved. Don't scare yourself." Qin Yining's ears were buzzing. She did not hear Bing Tang's words. Bing Tang anxiously grabbed Qin Yining's hand and pinched the acupuncture point between her thumb and index finger. "Bing Tang. Wang Fei, Wang Yi must be safe and sound. Don't panic." Qin Yining was in so much pain that she quivered. Her thoughts gradually became clear. She knew Bing Tang was right. She did not know what would happen when they reached the mountain. She had to calm down in order to command the situation. If someone wanted to harm Pang Xiao when he was about to be rescued, she would be able to remedy the situation in time. Qin Yining took a few deep breaths to calm herself down. She nodded and said, "I'm fine." Bing Tang breathed a sigh of relief. He held Qin Yining's hand tightly and kept comforting her. Not only was Qin Yining nervous, even Bing Tang and Ji Yun could not help but be nervous. Although the days of waiting were hard, they still had hope if there was no news. Once they received the news that something had happened to Wang Yi, as servants, they did not know what to do, let alone the Wang Fei who was deeply in love with Wang Yi. Bing Tang and Ji Yun admired Qin Yining from the bottom of their hearts. If it was them, they were not sure if they could be as strong as Qin Yining. The carriage quickly and steadily arrived at Mount Chuang. Qin Yining put on a slide and was carried to the scene by the guards. At this time, the sky had already darkened, and the night was pitch black. There were no stars and no moon. From afar, one could see many of Ji Zheyu's personal attendants and the elite tiger guards holding torches. The smoke from the torches gradually blended into the night. Their breaths were filled with the smell of burning torches and damp soil after the rain. Qin Yining got off the slide and walked over with a hand on her waist as a servant girl waited on her. The closer she got, the clearer the movements in the crowd became. At this time, everyone was digging with all their might and kept reminding each other. Ji Zheyu even went into action with his sleeves rolled up. He kept reminding the people inside, "Move back a bit, in case there are falling rocks at the entrance." Qin Yining pursed her lips and stood where she was. She knew she could not help and would only be a hindrance if she went up, so she just watched from afar. Now that the matter was about to be resolved, Qin Yining's heart finally calmed down. She believed that Pang Xiao would be safe. Otherwise, no matter what happened, Qin Yining believed she could bear and face it. Ji Zheyu and his men carefully dug with the help of the torches. As they dug, they talked to the people inside. Because the rocks and soil in the middle were too thick and the digging noise was too loud, the people outside could not hear what the people inside were talking about. They could not tell who was talking from the voices, but everyone kept reminding the people inside. It was as if they could feel more at ease when they heard the voices from the other side. Qin Yining stared at the digging area expectantly and did not want to miss any details. Everyone had been working hard to dig for a full 2 hours before they were finally able to move the large and small stones away. Fortunately, it had rained a few days ago, so the soil was not as soft as before. Otherwise, as they dug, the soil around the hole would fall into the hole at the same time, and everyone's efforts would soon be in vain. Okay, I see it. Quick, give me a hand, give me a hand. Soon, Qin Yining vaguely saw a pair of hands digging out of the hole. Ji Zheyu and a few soldiers grabbed the hands. After everyone quickly moved the soil around them, the owner of the hands poked his head out. It was Li Qitian. Qin Yining clenched his fists tightly. He could not hide the disappointment in his eyes. Soon, the disappointment was replaced by worry. Li Qitian was saved. What about Pang Xiao? Ji Zheyu pulled Li Qitian's hand. When the hole expanded to a certain extent, he pulled him out with all his might. The two of them fell to the ground together and the hole immediately collapsed again. Li Qitian was covered in mud and blood. His face was black and only his teeth and the whites of his eyes were white. He sat on the ground in a daze. Your Majesty, have you been hurt? Get up quickly. Ji Zheyu helped Li Qitian stand up. Ji Zheyu and the others looked at the emperor who was covered in mud and blood. His entire body exuded the smell of mold and decay. They were stunned for a moment before they bowed in unison. Greetings to your Majesty. Qin Yining came back to his senses and also bowed with the help of Bing Tang and Ji Yun. Li Qitian's eyes were dull. He could not believe that he had walked out of the underground palace alive. He looked up and saw the pitch-black night sky. His breath no longer smelled like mold in the underground palace. The smell of decay on his body was also washed away by the fresh air. He was saved. He was really saved. Li Qitian had been trapped in the underground palace for so long that he had almost forgotten his identity as the emperor. Now that he saw the people kneeling on the ground, he found his place again. Everyone, please rise. Looking at the situation in front of him, Li Qitian could not help but frown. This was because he only knew Ji Zheyu and Qin Yining. The rest of the people who helped dig seemed to be Pang Xiao's attendants. The rest should be Ji Zheyu's subordinates. Other than that, he did not see any other court officials. Why did no court officials or generals come to his rescue? Why did he not see any eunuchs from the palace? Could it be that the Empress Dowager, and his relatives were not worried about him? The underground palace was completely dark. Li Qitian was not sure how long he had been buried underground. But he was sure that the situation outside seemed to be developing in a direction he did not want. While everyone was bowing, Qin Yining had already stood up. She quickly walked to the entrance of the cave and knelt down. She used her hands to dig at the soil with difficulty. The fine stones scratched her fingertips and blood mixed into the wet soil. She continued to dig with her hands as if she did not feel the pain at all. After all the formalities, Li Qitian just stood there without saying a word. He also did not have any intention of ordering people to continue digging. Was Pang Xiao not inside? Wang Yi, are you inside? Qin Yining pressed her face against the soil and asked loudly. She did not hear a response from inside. But her voice made Li Qitian come back to his senses. Li Qitian had a conflicted expression on his face. He looked at Qin Yining digging with two servant girls, then looked at Ji Zheyu and the other soldiers in front of him, who were looking at him with shining eyes. Li Chitian finally cleared his throat and said, "Don't just pay your respects. Prince Zhongshuren is still inside." Qin Yining's hands paused. She suddenly turned around to look at Li Chitian with an expression of ecstasy. Ji Ziyu's eyes lit up. He hurriedly accepted the order and said, "Yes, Your Majesty." Then he led people forward to replace Qin Yining and the other two. Qin Yining was helped away by Bing Tang. She stared blankly in the direction of the excavation. Li Chitian looked at Qin Yining with a big belly. He did not know how long she had been standing there in such a sorry state. He felt a wave of discomfort in his heart. Chapter 618. Compared to the gorgeously dressed empress and imperial concubines in front of him, Li Chitian was now more envious of Qin Yining's true feelings towards Pang Xiao. Ji Ziyu continued to lead people to dig. Qin Yining couldn't help, so he turned around and ordered Ji Yun, "Take some people down the mountain and return to the Fu. Bring some clothes and order people to prepare hot water. Wang Yi will need it when he comes out." Qin Yining glanced at Li Chitian's bloodstains that had already turned black under the night sky. He could smell the pungent smell of blood from far away. He added, "Your Majesty also needs to change clothes and wash up, so that he won't catch a cold from the cold." Ji Yun complied, then turned around and called for 2 imperial bodyguards to follow her down the mountain. Li Chitian listened to Qin Yining's instructions and smiled. Prince Zhongshuren is still the most attentive. Qin Yining bent his knees and smiled, "Your Majesty needs to rest for a while. You can change clothes and wash up later." Bing Tang brought over some crude pottery bowls and pots, as well as some sorghum flatbread. He poured a bowl of warm water and presented it to Li Chitian with both hands. Li Chitian took it and drank it in one gulp, not caring about his image. Seeing that he drank the water in a hurry, Qin Yining ordered Bing Tang to continue pouring water for Li Chitian, saying, "Your Majesty, please have some flatbread." Li Chitian was actually so hungry that his chest was sticking to his back. He didn't care about his dirty hands and took a bite of the flatbread. He didn't know how long he had been trapped in the underground palace. When the explosion occurred, he, Li Guanwen, and Pang Xiao escaped to the only underground palace that didn't have any fire. However, the collapse of the underground palace was very serious. Pang Xiao ran fast and was lucky, but he and Li Guanwen were not so lucky. They were buried by the falling stone slabs and stones. Fortunately, the stone formed a triangular space, and Li Guanwen loyally protected his master, blocking for him, so he was not smashed to death on the spot. Li Guanwen was already seriously injured at that time. However, being buried under a pile of rocks without any water or food, he would die if he made a mistake. Li Chitian began to carefully move the stones, trying to dig a way out. Li Guanwen was dead. Li Chitian could only rely on himself. He didn't know how long he stayed in that small space. He was so thirsty that he even drank his own urine. He was so hungry that he even drank Li Guanwen's blood and ate Li Guanwen's flesh. The 2-legged sheep really didn't taste good, especially when it was eaten raw. But Li Chitian didn't want to die. He didn't want to give up. After he ate an arm, he finally found a way out. In case he couldn't find food, he took Li Guanwen's other arm as food. He walked and walked, and the smell of blood on his body made him numb. In the pitch-black environment, he didn't know where the way out was. Then he smelled the smell of roasted meat. Following the smell of roasted fat, he saw the light of the fire. He also saw Pang Xiao, who was sitting in front of the fire, eating the tribute and roasting the rat meat. At that time, his face and body were covered in Li Guanwen's blood, and he was holding Li Guanwen's arm in his hand. Li Chitian remembered the way Pang Xiao looked at him at that time. It was as if he wanted to turn back time. The side he didn't want people to see the most was still seen by Pang Xiao. There were people guarding the imperial mausoleum all year round, and the tributes were often changed. The noodles used to make the tributes were soaked in oil. After being in the underground palace for a long time, although there was a strange and bitter smell of the oil, the tributes were still edible. However, Pang Xiao had found the tributes before him. Li Chitian followed Pang Xiao to find the spring in the underground palace. He was afraid that Pang Xiao would kill him, but he also had to wait for Pang Xiao to give him food. Li Qitian hated that he couldn't erase this kind of memory. Just now, for a moment, he hated that he couldn't tell everyone that there was no one else in the underground palace. Just let Pang Xiao be buried in there. But on second thought, Qin Yining was such a stubborn person. She would definitely continue to dig if she wanted to see Pang Xiao dead or alive. It would be fine if she could find Pang Xiao's corpse. But if Pang Xiao was saved, she would spread the news. Others would definitely criticize him. Li Qitian couldn't let his character be tainted. That was why he told Ji Ziyu and the others that Pang Xiao was still underground. The taste of the sorghum biscuits in his mouth washed away the taste of blood. Li Qitian ate 2 of them with warm water before he felt a little better. At this time, Qin Yining had already reached the entrance of the cave. Wang Yi, can you hear me? I'm Ji Lan. Ji Ziyu shouted as he dug. After all, they had just rescued Li Qitian. Although soil and stones had collapsed and blocked the entrance again, it was still much easier than when they first started digging. I can hear you. Pang Xiao's voice came from the entrance of the cave. Through the layers of soil, his voice was very muffled. But to Qin Yining, this was simply the sound of nature. Qin Yining's eyes were filled with tears. He gritted his teeth and didn't rush over excitedly. At this time, the safest thing for Pang Xiao was to wait quietly and not cause trouble for Ji Ziyu and the others. After digging for another incense stick's worth of time, the entrance of the cave finally widened. Ji Ziyu grabbed Pang Xiao's hand and pulled him out of the cave. Then, the entrance of the cave that only allowed one person to pass through collapsed again. Ah Lan. Pang Xiao hugged Ji Ziyu and patted his shoulder with a smile. Thank you. Ji Ziyu smiled, revealing his neat white teeth. He didn't care that Pang Xiao was covered in soil and patted him hard on the back. He shook his head and said, Is there anyone else inside? How are you? Ji Ziyu lowered his head to size Pang Xiao up. He saw that Pang Xiao's robe was dirty, but it didn't have any bloodstains. Obviously, Pang Xiao had it easier than Li Qitian. Pang Xiao said, There's no one alive down there. Where's your majesty? Ji Ziyu stepped aside and said, Your majesty is here. The moment Ji Ziyu stepped aside, Pang Xiao saw his wife who was in a sorry state with a big belly. Sister Yi. Pang Xiao couldn't believe his eyes. This was Mount Chongshan, which was quite a distance away from the capital. Qin Yining was also pregnant. Moreover, they were found at random times. This could only mean that Qin Yining had been waiting for him on the mountain all this time, waiting for him to come out. Pang Xiao couldn't be bothered to salute Li Qitian. He walked around Ji Ziyu and quickly walked to Qin Yining. He stretched out his arms and slowly hugged her. Sister Yi, I'm sorry for making you worry. Qin Yining buried her face in Pang Xiao's shoulder. Tears rolled down her cheeks. Pang Xiao was covered in soil, but she didn't care at all. She just pressed herself tightly against Pang Xiao's chest and whispered, Bodhisattva bless you. You're fine. You're fine. Yes, I'm fine. Sister Yi, don't be agitated. You have to think about the child. His large hand touched Qin Yining's cheek, leaving a few mud marks on her face. Look at how much weight you've lost. How long have I been in the underground palace? Have you never had a proper meal before? It's been 20 days. Qin Yining's tears left 2 white tear stains on her dirty little face. I thought you were already. Pang Xiao didn't know that she had survived in the underground palace for 20 days. Chapter 619. Saved. 3. How could Qin Yining control her emotions at this time? She had been in fear for so many days. Pang Xiao had an accident, she had almost been assassinated by the Tian Jizi, her father had almost been taken away, her family had been in chaos when they learned that something had happened to Pang Xiao. Everything was on her shoulders, but in order to not harm the child in her womb, she could not even let go of her emotions and cry. The pain she felt was indescribable. Now that Pang Xiao was safe and sound, why did she have to suppress herself? Qin Yining threw herself into Pang Xiao's arms and sobbed. Even so, she still controlled herself and did not cry. But her sobbing like a kitten made Pang Xiao's heart ache even more. Be good, don't cry. I'm fine. If you cry, you'll have a headache. Don't cry, okay? Pang Xiao clumsily helped her wipe her tears. However, he was covered in mud and his hands only made her face even dirtier. Ji Ziyu stood at the side and panted tiredly as he leaned on a shovel. He looked at the figures of Pang Xiao and Qin Yining hugging each other and couldn't help but smile. Li Qitian had just washed her face. She looked at Pang Xiao with an unfathomable expression. Ji Ziyu's soldiers and the Jinghu Wei led by Huzi were either sitting or lying down. They looked at Pang Xiao's protective appearance and all of them grinned. Their dirty faces revealed their neat white teeth. It was slightly comical but very sincere. Qin Yining cried for a while before she felt better. When she stood up, she found that she had become the focus of everyone's gaze. She couldn't help but blush as she lowered her head and retreated. Pang Xiao's large hand lovingly touched her face and successfully left 3 mud marks on her face. Off to the side, Huzi, who had been watching the commotion for a long time, was so amused that she chuckled. Wang Yi, why don't you take a look at yourself before getting involved in this mess? Her words made all the men laugh. Pang Xiao waved his fist at Huzi, then turned around with a smile and cupped one hand in the other before saluting Li Qitian. Your Majesty, I have lost my composure. Please forgive me, Your Majesty. Li Qitian gently smiled and waved his hand. It's okay. There's no need to be so polite between you and me. Besides, you're a young couple. I can understand. In the eyes of the soldiers, the emperor was high and mighty. Now that they saw him being so approachable with their own eyes, it really surprised everyone. Huzi fetched a basin of water for Pang Xiao to wash her face. At this moment, Ji Yun, who had been sent down the mountain by Qin Yining, hurriedly came up the mountain with 2 bodyguards. Qin Yining was a little surprised and said, "Why are you back so soon?" Ji Yun said with a serious expression, "Princess, we couldn't go down the mountain at all. The situation outside was not right. The foot of the mountain was surrounded by many people. Those people claimed that they were here to catch Taytan spies. When they saw that I was going down the mountain, they even interrogated me and asked me about the situation on the mountain. They asked me if I had found anything." Everyone quieted down and looked at Ji Yun, who had replied. Qin Yining asked, "Did you tell them?" "No, I saw that the situation was not right. How would I dare to reveal what happened on the mountain? I only said that Princess ordered me to go down the mountain and go home to get something." Qin Yining nodded and looked at Pang Xiao questioningly. Pang Xiao looked at Ji Ziyu. Who dares to come to the mountain to catch spies at this juncture? Don't they know that you are here to rescue Your Majesty? Ji Ziyu said calmly, "Maybe Prince Li can't bear it anymore." Prince Li? Li Qitian narrowed his eyes. Ji Ziyu said, "The Empress Dowager ordered Prince Li to be the regent of the country, and the Empress Dowager will listen to the government from behind the curtain. Maybe Prince Li's spies noticed the movement on the mountain." It was an understatement, but it clearly stated the stakes. Prince Li was in power and didn't want to let go. As long as Li Qitian was really buried in the underground palace, Prince Li could really ascend to that position. Was this the reason why there was no one at the scene to rescue him? Li Qitian said with an ashen face, "No matter how many people there are at the foot of the mountain, can they be stronger than the Tiger Army? Jilan, I order you to immediately dispatch the Tiger Army to destroy those traitors." Ji Ziyu cupped his hands. "Replying to Your Majesty, this subject is nothing except for the position of Prince Consort that hasn't been revoked by the Princess Royal, and there's no reason to take away the title of nobility. The current commander-in-chief of the Tiger Army is Marquis Qingyang." "What?" Li Qitian gritted his teeth and roared, "This is nonsense." Li Qitian knew what kind of person Marquis Qingyang was. Now that the situation was tense, the Tiger Army might go to the battlefield at any time. How could someone like Marquis Qingyang be the commander-in-chief of the Tiger Army? "Is this the Empress Dowager's decree?" "Replying to Your Majesty, yes." Li Qitian's veins popped out on his forehead and he clenched his fists. He was trapped in the underground palace and didn't know if he was dead or alive. His wife didn't come to guard him like Qin Yining, and his mother was busy seizing power and didn't care about him. Didn't she think that if Prince Li was ambitious, would he still be alive as the emperor? Even if he was alive, he would let Prince Li find a way to kill him. The people at the foot of the mountain who used the excuse of capturing Taytan's spies were the evidence. Wait. Taytan's spies? Why did they say they were here to capture Taytan's spies? Why didn't they find a more reliable reason? If the Taytan came to the capital, what would Daju's border guards do? Your Majesty. Ji Ziyu said again, the Taytan have already broken through 3 passes. The Dragon Legion has already retreated to Tianmen Pass and is waiting for reinforcements. Li Qitian's head was buzzing. It had only been 20 days, and so many things had happened outside. If he still didn't come out, would Daju be persecuted and destroyed? Li Qitian said in a deep voice, I know. We can talk about the rest later. Right now, it's important to think of a way to get down the mountain safely. Ji Ziyu nodded and ordered the person beside him, go down and see the situation. If you see them, say that you were ordered to go back to the prince's residence to help me get a change of clothes. I plan to continue fighting on the mountain. Your Majesty and Prince Zhongshiren must not leak the news that they have been rescued. Yes. The trusted aide immediately received the order and ran away. It didn't take long for him to return like a cloud in defeat. Replying to Your Majesty, the people at the foot of the mountain have already begun to narrow the encirclement. Prince Li ordered that we can't let the Taytan spies go. We plan to search inch by inch. Li Qitian gritted his teeth and squeezed out a sentence, Prince Li, how dare you? The mountain was silent. Ji Ziyu's trusted aide and Jinghu Wei all had serious expressions. Everyone had been working on the mountain for more than 20 days. During this period, they could only take turns to rest. They had been digging almost non-stop, and everyone was exhausted. Moreover, there were less than 50 people. Since the people at the foot of the mountain could surround the entire mountain, their numbers couldn't be underestimated. With such a disparity in strength, if they really fought, their chances of winning were not high. Everyone became nervous. The other party would rather kill 1,000 by mistake than let one go. If they forcefully broke through, they might not be their match. Pang Xiao shook his head and sighed, the situation has actually developed to this point. It seems that it won't be easy for Your Majesty to get down the mountain safely. Chapter 620. How could Li Qitian not know that it was not easy to leave the mountain? Although Pang Xiao was telling the truth, Li Qitian still felt that there was a hint of mockery in his words. Now, there was no one he could trust on the mountain except for Ji Ziyu. Although Pang Xiao did not intend to kill him in the underground palace, he did not show much respect to him either. Moreover, Pang Xiao had seen the most embarrassing side of him in his life. Li Qitian felt that his dignity as an emperor could not be maintained in front of Pang Xiao. What was the difference between his situation now and when he was in the underground palace? They were both begging for food and had to rely on others to survive. Li Qitian was conflicted and bitter. He did not know how to choose between his dignity as an emperor and his survival. He did not know how to behave in a more dignified manner. By this time, Qin Yining had already wiped his face and combed his hair again. Seeing the serious expressions on everyone's faces, Li Qitian's expression was particularly interesting. After thinking for a while, he understood the crux of the matter. Since Pang Xiao did not take the opportunity to kill Li Qitian in the underground palace, it meant that he recognized that Li Qitian's survival was more beneficial than detrimental. Since they had already come to this point, they might as well help him until the end. Thinking of this, Qin Yining said, it's better to make a decision as soon as possible. If their people rush up, it will be too late to hide. The situation on the mountain was clear at a glance. They were surrounded. Li Qitian and Pang Xiao were rescued at the same time. Naturally, both of them had to hide. Where could these two live people hide? Li Qitian furrowed his brows and looked around for a suitable hiding place. Ji Ziyu said, Your Majesty does not need to worry. If we can't fight, Wang Yi and I will lead our brothers to escort Your Majesty out of the encirclement. Pang Xiao shook his head. To share your Majesty's worries, I have the same intention as Marquis Dingbei. However, forcibly breaking out of the encirclement is not a foolproof plan. Your Majesty can't just leave the mountain. What we need to do is to let your Majesty return to the palace and let Prince Li obediently hand over the power of regent. Ji Ziyu thought for a while and nodded in agreement. You're right. I was too anxious. Li Chitian frowned and said, if you want Prince Li to hand over the power must take it back. Something happened to His Majesty here. Empress Dowager did this for the sake of the stability of the country. If Empress Dowager knows that His Majesty is safe, she will take back her power immediately. Qin Yining analyzed, so Commandery Prince Li will never want His Majesty to see Empress Dowager successfully. This makes things even more difficult. Everyone sighed. At this time, Huzi, who was in charge of scouting ahead, ran over. Replying to Your Majesty, Wang Yi, Marquis Dingbei, the light at the foot of the mountain is getting closer. It's better to make a decision early. Pang Xiao pursed his lips and narrowed his long and narrow eyes. He already had an idea. But with his status, if he said this now, Li Chitian might misunderstand him even more. Qin Yining said, if you want to see the Empress Dowager, you must first quietly escort Your Majesty out of the encirclement without alerting Prince Li. So, it's impossible to force your way in. He looked at Li Chitian and said hesitantly, Your Majesty, I have an idea, but it's too offensive. Pang Xiao's eyes flashed, and he looked at Qin Yining curiously. Li Chitian was anxious. At this critical juncture, he didn't have time to think about anything else. The most important thing was to firmly grasp the throne. Since ancient times, there was a saying that one could endure hardships to gain courage. What was he afraid of? Prince Zhongshuren, please speak. We won't blame you. Qin Yining nodded, then went over to Li Chitian, Pang Xiao, and Ji Ziyu and said this. Pang Xiao couldn't help but sigh. There really was such a wonderful fate in the world. They really were telepathic and thought of the same thing. Ji Ziyu nodded seriously. I think it's feasible. But Your Majesty will be wronged. Li Chitian's mouth twitched. If he listened to Qin Yining, he would have another black mark in his life. He would really lose face. But if he didn't listen to her, he couldn't think of a second way. After thinking about it for a long time, Li Chitian sighed. A real man knows when to yield and when not. Okay. I'll listen to you. Seeing that Li Chitian agreed, Qin Yining called Bing Tang and Ji Yun over and gave them a few instructions. The two of them went to prepare with a serious expression. Pang Xiao and Li Chitian looked at each other and shook their heads with wry smiles, then went to change clothes. After a short while, two tall and burly women were freshly done. Young Man and Xie Yu, who were good at disguising themselves, weren't with Qin Yining and Pang Xiao. Fortunately, Ji Yun and Bing Tang were skillful. They shaved their faces and changed into women's clothes and cloaks that Qin Yining had prepared for them in the carriage. They combed their hair and even put flowers on it. Although the clothes didn't fit and the two of them looked very masculine as servants, they could fool them under the cover of night as long as they didn't open their mouths. Later, I'll pretend that I'm worried about Wang Yi and that my pregnancy is affected. Marquis Dingbei is worried that he won't be able to explain it to his brothers if something happens to me, so he wants to send me down the mountain. Your Majesty and Wang Yi will pretend to be the servants I brought and take care of me in the carriage. Qin Yining supported his waist with both hands. His bulging abdomen was the best excuse now. I believe that if they want to catch Tatan's spies, they won't be unable to recognize Mayan Prince Consort Ji's faces. Moreover, even if Prince Li is ambitious, he will want to be justified. He won't make things difficult for a pregnant woman like me. Li Chitian nodded repeatedly as he listened. The plan was good. However, in order to survive, he had to pretend to be a woman and put on makeup. His heart was filled with anger. The most important thing was that Pang Xiao looked better than him even if he dressed up as a woman. Li Chitian couldn't describe his feelings. As the emperor, he was inferior to others in every aspect. Pang Xiao nodded and said, Your Majesty, this subject thinks that this plan is very good. Later, you will follow us back to the prince's mansion. As for how to deal with Prince Li, we will discuss it when we return to the prince's mansion. If this subject and my wife can't think of a good plan, this subject's father-in-law is still in the mansion. Qin Huayuan, who was known as the wise Pan En, could be said to be the model of a clever person. With him around, it seemed that any problem could be solved. However, for Li Chitian, who had just issued an edict to remove Qin Huayuan from his position for no reason, asking Qin Huayuan for help when something happened was like slapping him in the face. However, what could he do if he didn't go? Now that Pang Xiao dared to invite him to the prince's mansion in front of so many people and even took on the responsibility to help him think of a solution, Li Chitian knew that Pang Xiao didn't have any killing intent towards him. At least, he didn't have any now. It was already very good that Pang Xiao was willing to help. Li Chitian couldn't ask for anything else. Thinking of this, Li Chitian nodded, this is very good. Qin Yining then turned to instruct Bing Tang and Ji Yun, who had already changed into men's clothing, later, you will pretend to be soldiers and continue to dig here with everyone. Remember to make your faces dirty and don't let anyone see any clues. Yes. Wang Fei, don't worry. We all understand. Bing Tang smiled and nodded. Qin Yining said, don't worry. Since Prince Li wants the throne, he wants to be justified. He also wants a reputation. Right now, he definitely doesn't have any concrete evidence that your majesty has been saved. Otherwise, he would have already come up the mountain. Continue to dig here and act as if you are in a hurry to rescue. When Prince Li's people come up the mountain, they won't harm your lives. Otherwise, he won't be able to explain himself to the outside world. At most, he will encircle you and search the mountain. You will suffer on the mountain for a night. Tomorrow morning, Prince Consort Ji and I will return to the mountain and continue to dig with you. At that time, Prince Li's people will have to withdraw. Yes, Wang Fei. Bing Tang and Ji Yun responded in unison. Huzi also nodded along with Jinghu Wei. He didn't forget to praise her with a smile. Wang Fei is indeed the daughter of wise Pan En. You are simply a female zhuge. The Jinghu Wei nodded in agreement. They originally admired Pang Xiao and respected Qin Yining. During the time when Pang Xiao was in trouble, the Jinghu Wei had seen Qin Yining's methods. They were already very impressed with her. Now that Qin Yining could be so meticulous, they weren't surprised at all. Ji Zheyu ordered his trusted aides, do not reveal anything about what happened on the mountain. Yes. The trusted aides all solemnly responded. Qin Yining, Pang Xiao, Ji Zheyu, and Li Chitian quietly walked down the mountain. They avoided people and sat in the carriage. The carriage was very spacious, but because other than Qin Yining, a pregnant woman, there were two tall and strong men stuffed inside, it seemed very crowded. Ji Zheyu sat at the shaft of the carriage and acted as the driver for Qin Yining. The carriage sped down the gentle slope of the mountain. In just a few breaths, they met a group of people who were going up the mountain. These people were all wearing the uniforms of the 5 cities warden's office. The torches in their hands lit up the surroundings. They saw a carriage coming down, and the driver was Ji Zheyu. The group of people were stunned for a moment. Ji Zheyu frowned and scolded, get out of the way. People who had experienced the battlefield had an imposing aura. These people who lived like princes in the capital naturally couldn't compare to the soldiers at the border. After being yelled at by Ji Zheyu, they were somewhat afraid. The leader of the group was calm. He cupped his hands and said, Prince Consort Ji, may I know who is in the carriage? Ji Zheyu raised his hand and lashed out with his whip. The whip whistled through the air in front of that person, scaring him into closing his eyes. However, Ji Zheyu knew his limits and didn't have any intention of hurting this person. The whip didn't touch his skin. Prince Zhongxian's consort. Her pregnancy has been affected. I want to send her down the mountain to see a doctor. Why aren't you moving out of the way? Prince Consort Ji, we are here on Prince Li's orders to capture the Taytan spy. If we let the spy leave, it will be difficult to explain ourselves later. We hope that Prince Consort Ji will understand and allow us to search the carriage. Ji Zheyu's expression was gloomy. This time, he didn't show any mercy. He lashed out with his whip at that person's shoulder, impudent. The person in the carriage is Prince Zhengxian's consort. How can I let you search her as you wish? The princess consort's pregnancy has been affected. If anything happens to her, how many lives can you afford to lose? That person sucked in a breath of cold air from the pain. He clutched his shoulder with a pale face and couldn't speak. When his companion saw Ji Ziyu's rude and unreasonable behavior, he couldn't help but mock. Could it be that there really is a Taytan spy in the carriage? Is that why Prince Consort Ji won't allow us to search? How dare you? Ji Ziyu narrowed his eyes. He looked like he was about to kill someone. The people who were searching the carriage were so scared that they took a few steps back. Chapter 621. Ji Ziyu turned his head and looked worriedly at Qin Yining. His tone became more conciliatory. Even so, Wang Fei is precious. Lan has to protect the brotherhood. Wang Yi is not here and naturally has to take care of Wang Yi's family. These nameless soldiers dare to humiliate Wang Fei like this. It is hateful. I understand Marquis Yi's meaning, Qin Yining said weakly, but now is not the time to argue with them. As he spoke, he lifted the curtain a little more. Come and take a look. My carriage is small. Other than me, there are only 2 experienced servants on the carriage. My mother-in-law specially found them to serve me. Quickly let me in after you have seen. My stomach is really not feeling well. If something happens, think about whether your hungry brains can bear the consequences. The man who had been whipped by Ji Ziyu had already tasted Ji Ziyu's toughness and fierceness. Seeing Qin Yining's delicate and frowning appearance, it was obvious that she had a miscarriage and wasn't faking it. In his heart, he already believed a little. The leaders looked at each other and then walked together to the carriage. They lifted the curtain and looked inside. There were 2 stout older women inside, both of whom were wearing makeup. The slightly plump older woman had at least 2 kilograms of powder on her face and red lips. The brothers expressed deep suspicion about the eyes of the servants of the Wang Fu. They saw that there was no hiding place in the carriage and then looked under the carriage. After confirming that there was no hiding place, they retreated and bowed to Ji Ziyu and Qin Yining. Prince Consort Ji, Wang Fei, we are just following Prince Li's orders. We have offended you. Qin Yining tiredly put down the curtain. Ji Ziyu snorted coldly and used his whip to point in the direction of the people. He did not waste any more time and hurriedly drove the carriage down the mountain. The people of the warden's office of the 5 cities saw Ji Ziyu drive the carriage away and couldn't help but discuss. It seems like people saying that Prince Consort Ji and Prince Zhengxian don't get along is pure nonsense. Otherwise, why would they be willing to take care of Prince Zhengxian's family at this time? That's right. The day before yesterday, in order to protect the people of the prince's estate, Prince Consort Ma had a direct confrontation with the Marquis of Qingyang. Not necessarily. Didn't you see what the princess consort looked like? Such a beauty. If she were to look at me, my entire body would go limp. If she were to beg me in a coquettish voice, I would do it even if she wanted my life. Maybe there's some unspeakable relationship between them. There are so many dirty things going on between these nobles. The group continued to head up the mountain as they discussed among themselves. In the carriage, Pang Xiao and Li Chitian watched from the window as the torches carried by those people went further and further away. Only then did they both sit down and return to the carriage. Li Chitian smiled at Qin Yining. Sister-in-law's idea is good. It was thanks to sister-in-law's quick-wittedness that we were able to leave the mountain this time. Unexpectedly, he resumed calling Pang Xiao his brother. This was also the first time he was so close and polite to Qin Yining. Qin Yining immediately understood Li Chitian's meaning. In the current situation, if Li Chitian still wanted the throne, he would have to rely on Pang Xiao and Ji Ziyu. If one of these 2 people refused to help and instead played dirty tricks, Li Chitian's chances of winning were almost 0. Therefore, he was playing the friendship card. Qin Yining was naturally happy to cooperate. She said shyly and fearfully, "Your Majesty is overpraising me. This subject's wife is only a woman and only has a little bit of cleverness. How can I bear your Majesty's praise?" Li Chitian waved his hand and smiled. What are you talking about? Sister-in-law can be called a heroine, a female Zhuge Liang. No one can deny this point. So now, she was not a sinner who killed a Nari Khan and brought war to Daeju? Qin Yining couldn't help but admire Li Chitian's ability to adapt to circumstances. It was no wonder that he could achieve great things and become the founding monarch of a country. This person's bottom line was completely different from ordinary people. Pang Xiao put her arm around Qin Yining's shoulder and laughed. Brother, don't exaggerate. Sister Yi is thin-skinned and will be shy. Qin Yining's mouth twitched. Pang Xiao didn't have any psychological barriers when she called Li Chitian brother. It could be seen that compared to Li Chitian, Pang Xiao's bottom line was also very different. Regardless of what Li Chitian was thinking, on the surface, he was very happy that Pang Xiao called him brother. Pang Xiao didn't kill him and was willing to show that she was close to him. This meant that the cooperation between him and Pang Xiao could still continue. Li Chitian's heart calmed down a little. He took a handkerchief and wiped the rouge on his mouth before turning to wipe his face. Qin Yining wanted to remind him that he could wipe it off. After all, he was an emperor. In order to escape, he had to dress up as a woman and put on makeup on his face. If this kind of dark history was seen by anyone, it could be dug up. Qin Yining didn't want the people in the Fu to see Li Chitian like this. Now that he could wipe it off himself, she didn't have to waste her breath. The carriage quickly returned to the Fu. Ji Zheyu rushed the carriage back and gave the doorman a fright. He thought that something big had happened to Qin Yining and hurriedly sent someone inside to inform him. At the same time, he removed the threshold to let the carriage in. Ji Zheyu didn't explain and directly drove the carriage to Saiqing Garden. Hearing the commotion, Madame Ma rushed out. When she saw that Qin Yining had been sent back by Ji Zheyu, she immediately went up to him. Yi lass, what's the matter? Ah, what's the matter? Grandmother, I'm fine. I'm just a little tired. The Marquis had to go down the mountain to wash up, so he escorted me back. Madame Ma heard this and heaved a sigh of relief. She smiled at Ji Zheyu and said, "Thank you very much." Ji Zheyu smiled and waved his hand. At this moment, Qin Yining turned around and dismissed the servants who were watching at the door. He said, "Don't be so alarmed. I'm fine. Go and tell my parents that I'm fine. I'll change my clothes before paying my respects." "Yes." The servant outside the door answered and left. Only then did Qin Yining pat the wall of the carriage. The door curtain was lifted and two burly servants jumped out. The courtyard was dark and there were only 2 lanterns hanging under the eaves of the corridor in the main room. The light was very dim and Madame Ma couldn't see who it was at all. However, Qin Yining brought Ji Yun and Bing Tang with him. These 2 servants were really unfamiliar. Madame Ma couldn't help but pull Qin Yining behind her and look at him intently. His eyes immediately widened when he saw what was on the screen. Big. Pang Xiao smiled at Madame Ma, made a shushing gesture, and reached out to hug her. Qin Yining also smiled and shook Madame Ma's hand. Madame Ma's tears immediately gushed out. When she saw that Pang Xiao had actually changed into women's clothes and came back with Qin Yining, she knew that this matter couldn't be made public. She hurriedly covered her mouth and nodded repeatedly. She patted Pang Xiao's shoulder twice and turned to walk into the room. The group of people entered the room. Qin Yining sent Xian Yun and Lian Xiaoju out. He asked them to wait in the courtyard. Except for Qin Huayuan, everyone else had to be notified first. After the 2 of them left, Pang Xiao helped Madame Ma sit up. Then, he knelt down and kowtowed to Madame Ma. Chapter 622. Madame Ma's hands trembled. She bowed and held Pang Xiao's face. She rubbed her thumb on his cheek and confirmed that his skin was warm. This was indeed her beloved grandson. Tears blurred her vision again. She was so excited that she didn't forget to lower her voice. Dai Fu, you're finally back. You stinky child. Do you know that you almost scared your grandmother to death? Madame Ma had a strong personality. Pang Xiao had never seen her on the verge of collapse. He couldn't help but feel sour and almost shed tears. Pang Xiao rubbed his face against Madame Ma's hand. "Grandmother, don't be sad. I'm fine. Not only am I fine, but your Majesty is also fine." Under Pang Xiao's intentional reminder, Madame Ma's heart trembled. She gradually calmed down and looked at the person dressed like a banshee. "If it wasn't your Majesty, who else could it be?" Madame Ma bit her cheeks and tried her best to not show any abnormality. She bowed to Li Chitian. "Greetings to your Majesty. I'm old and dim-sighted. I was too excited to see Dai Fu and was impolite for a moment. Your Majesty, please forgive me." Li Chitian supported her with both hands and said with a smile, "Old madam, you don't have to be so polite. We're all family. Jishi and I have always been on the same side. It's just that we have to disturb your residence now." Madame Ma smiled honestly. "There's no need to disturb. It's our honor. You haven't eaten yet, right? How about this? I'll order people to prepare food and wash clothes." Looking at Ji Ziyu covered in mud, Pang Xiao and Li Chitian also in a sorry state, Madame Ma said with heartache, "Ah, you've all suffered." Qin Yining held his waist and whispered to Madame Ma, "Grandmother, it's not appropriate to spread the news that your Majesty and Dai Fu were saved. Don't let it slip when you go out. If anyone asks, just say that Marquis Dingbei sent me back and asked me to stay for a meal to express his gratitude." Madame Ma nodded seriously. "Yes, grandmother knows. Don't worry. In a moment, when I have finished preparing everything, I will set up a meal in the front hall and let the in-laws entertain North Marquis outside. Your Majesty will have to suffer a bit and eat in Saiqing Garden." Li Chitian was overjoyed. He smiled and said, "Thank you for being so considerate. Your Majesty, you don't have to be so courteous. I don't deserve it." Madame Ma's etiquette was thorough. Then, she turned around and left to make arrangements. Not long after, Xian Yun and Lian Xiaoju came back with a change of clothes. Seeing that Pang Xiao had returned, Xian Yun and Lian Xiaoju were so happy that they jumped. Qin Yining had to give them some instructions. The two of them were loyal and devoted to Qin Yining and knew how to act appropriately. They immediately understood what to do. Pang Xiao led Li Chitian and Ji Ziyu to take a detour to the prepared clean room at the back of the house to bathe and change clothes. He changed into a set of sapphire blue embroidered arrow sleeves robes that Pang Xiao had not yet worn. A jade belt was tied around his waist. Ji Ziyu was led by a maidservant to the front hall. Ji Ziyu was born with a fair complexion. His appearance was also beautiful, but his figure was similar to Pang Xiao's. When he wore this gorgeous embroidered robe, it gave him a cold and frosty beauty. Seeing Qin Huayuan, Ji Ziyu first cupped his hands and bowed, "Uncle Qin. North pacifying Marquis, don't be like this. Please sit." After Ji Ziyu sat down, he began to eat with Qin Huayuan. The two of them talked about what happened in the mountains. Ji Ziyu only said that he would continue to dig tomorrow. Qin Huayuan also cooperated with him and expressed his melancholy and anxiousness. After Ji Ziyu finished eating, he said his goodbyes. Qin Huayuan specially ordered people to prepare a good horse for Ji Ziyu. After Ji Ziyu left on his horse, Qin Huayuan had the servants carry him to Saiqing Garden. And a group of people who were secretly monitoring outside the palace told the news to the eldest princess's palace. Replying to the eldest princess, Prince Consort Ji personally sent Prince Zhongxian's consort back to the palace today. When she went in, she was covered in mud. When she came out, she not only took a bath, but also changed into a new set of clothes. It seems like Prince Consort Ji's mood is quite good. Li Helan had been in a very bad mood these past 2 days. She didn't know if her imperial brother was dead or alive, so she had a bad premonition. However, her imperial mother was not the same as before and refused to listen to her. Ji Ziyu was becoming more and more cold to her and did not treat her imperial mother with respect. That day, he had publicly humiliated the servants of Xi'an Palace, and it was not the first time. That was the same as slapping the Empress Dowager in front of everyone. Later, in order to Qin Yining that slut's father, Ji Ziyu went against her own uncle. Her uncle had stolen Ji Ziyu's command of the Tiger Army. She was indeed dissatisfied with this matter, but that was her imperial mother's arrangement and she had no other choice. However, Ji Ziyu was not willing to give face to her maternal uncle and did not put her in his eyes. Thinking back to the past few days, Ji Ziyu's eyes were cold when he saw her as if she was a stranger. Hearing the servant's words, Li Helan thought of how Ji Ziyu had arranged for his personal guards to clash with the Marquis of Qingyang in order to protect the palace. She couldn't help but feel sour inside. She asked in a cold voice, "Is what you said true? Prince Consort Ji really went to the palace to change into a new set of clothes? It's the middle of the night, did you see wrongly?" The spies quickly shook their heads. This one did not see wrongly. Prince Consort Ji really did send the princess consort back to the palace and stayed inside for about 2 hours. Li Helan gritted her teeth in anger. He had never seen Ji Ziyu give her any face, but he had the patience to go to the palace to accompany his friend's wife and even changed his clothes there. It was so dark, what did he do? Could it be that Ji Ziyu had taken a liking to Qin Yining, that seductress? Li Helan looked at herself in the mirror and then thought of Qin Yining's appearance. She angrily slapped the table. Such a fox. You still don't forget to seduce men even when you're pregnant. Eldest princess. This one. He did not say that Ji Ziyu and the Prince Zhengxian's consort had that kind of relationship. Why did the eldest princess think wrongly? If the prince consort knew of this, wouldn't he be considered a person who stirred up trouble? The spies finally realized how much ambiguity their words had created. They quickly wanted to fix it, but the eldest princess did not give them time. She waved her hand and had them leave. While Li Helan was filled with anger and wanted to kill someone, they had already finished eating dinner in Saiqing Garden. Qin Huayuan was eating dinner with Li Qitian. During this time, he calmly told her what had happened in the capital during the 20 days they were trapped in the underground palace. Because he was no longer an official of the court, Qin Yining did not say much of the information that Qin Huayuan had gathered. He only said what normal people in the capital could see. But even like this, Li Qitian was so angry that she lost her appetite. The actions of the Empress Dowager and Empress had greatly disappointed Li Qitian. Qin Yining had the servants clear the table and have them bring in tea. Seeing that the atmosphere was still very serious, Qin Yining tried to persuade her, "Your Majesty, please calm down. It seems like the Empress Dowager has no other choice. Your Majesty is trapped in the underground palace and the Empress Dowager can only hold power in her own hands to ensure that the country does not change hands. This is also for your Majesty to protect the country. It's a good thing that your Majesty is fine, so there is still time." Hearing Qin Yining say this, Li Qitian calmed down and analyzed it. There was indeed this layer of meaning. Moreover, now was not the time to blame the Empress Dowager. Li Qitian said, "If we want to restore this one's identity, the first thing is to let the Empress Dowager know that this one is still alive. I believe that with this one here, Mother would not be willing to give her power to others. Your Majesty's words are correct." Pang Xiao nodded and then said, "Prince Li has already made his decision. If your Majesty appears, he will definitely think of a way to stop you. It is best to find a way to bypass Prince Li's eyes and let the Empress Dowager know that your Majesty is fine." Chapter 623. No one present was stupid. Hearing this, they immediately understood what Qin Yining meant. Before Pang Xiao could say anything, Li Qitian had already nodded with a smile. "If sister-in-law is willing to do it, it will be much easier. You just need to pass a token into the palace and say that you want to pay respects to the Empress. Seeing that Jixi and I are trapped in the underground palace together, the Empress Dowager will definitely see you. At that time, you will be able to make things clear." The more Li Qitian spoke, the more excited his tone became. He looked at Qin Yining with eyes full of expectation. Qin Yining also smiled and nodded, "Your Majesty is right." However, Pang Xiao felt that something was wrong. If it can be that easy, of course, it will be good. "I'm afraid that the palace is not safe now. If we act rashly, won't we implicate the Empress Dowager? In fact, Pang Xiao was worried that Qin Yining would be implicated. Once Qin Yining entered the palace and was detained by Prince Li's people, wouldn't she be in danger again? However, as a loyal and patriotic person, it was not convenient for him to say this. Qin Yining naturally knew Pang Xiao's worries. However, since Pang Xiao did not kill the emperor in the underground palace and now brought him back, it was impossible for her to ignore the emperor's matter. She must help him stabilize the country. Qin Yining did not know how Pang Xiao analyzed the situation, but she felt that if she had the chance to kill Li Chitian, she would not do it. In the current situation, Li Chitian being alive was the biggest advantage for them. First, a new emperor brings in new officials. If someone else was in that position, their situation might be even worse. Second, if Li Chitian did not unite the various factions in Daju, facing the iron hooves of the Taitan, it was only a matter of time before they were attacked into the capital. Facing the Taitan, Pang Xiao would still have no advantage. Moreover, Anari Khan was killed by her. The Taitan hated them to the bone. When the time came, they would definitely face a storm. From Qin Yining's point of view, for the sake of stability, supporting Li Chitian to return to the throne was the best choice for them. I think we can do this matter with 2 legs. Qin Yining made up her mind and spoke her thoughts in a low voice. Qin Huayuan nodded repeatedly as he listened to the conversation. He also made some suggestions in a low voice from time to time. Pang Xiao and Li Chitian also expressed their opinions. After a round of discussion, the plan was decided in less than 2 incense sticks worth of time. At this time, Li Chitian looked at Qin Yining with an irrepressible passion in her eyes. Why wasn't such a smart woman his wife? Why wasn't he as lucky as Pang Xiao? Thinking of his empress who still hadn't done anything, Li Chitian couldn't help but feel annoyed. After everything was discussed properly, Qin Yining gave up the main room of Saiqing Garden for Li Chitian to live in. The couple moved to the room next to Madame Ma's. Qin Huayuan left Saiqing Garden as usual. According to the plan, he did not leak the news of Li Chitian being rescued. He asked Xian Yun and Lian Xiaoju to pay attention to the servants and not allow them to reveal the slightest information. After watching the 2 of them leave, Qin Yining leaned tiredly in Pang Xiao's arms. There was only a silk lamp lit in the room. The dim light shone into the bed through a layer of gauze curtain, so they couldn't see each other clearly. Pang Xiao hugged her from behind. His big hand carefully covered her belly, which had become bigger. He carefully sniffed her neck and the side of her face. Finally, he buried his face in her shoulder and hair. His hot breath sprayed on her shoulder. "Sister Yi, I miss you so much." Qin Yining's nose twitched when she heard this, and tears almost fell. "Me too. Fortunately, you are safe and sound. This time, it was scary but not dangerous. Otherwise, I wouldn't know what to do." Pang Xiao heard her muffled voice, so he moved closer to her. Seeing the sparkling and translucent tears on her cheeks, his heart ached to the extreme. "Sister Yi, it's my fault. I'm the one who made you so worried. I was actually very anxious inside. I thought, what if I couldn't get out? What would you do? I was worried that something might happen to you, but I also know that you are a smart girl. You are responsible. You won't ignore our family. You will give birth to the child and raise it. It's just that no one will understand the pain in your heart. You can only hide your feelings and then pretend to be strong in front of others." Pang Xiao's lips were dry and cracked in a few places. He fell on Qin Yining's cheek and kissed her tears dry. Qin Yining smiled, but more tears flowed down her cheeks. "Fortunately, God has mercy. Yes, fortunately, God has mercy." Pang Xiao hugged her and sighed with satisfaction. Then he asked, "What happened these days? You didn't encounter any trouble, right?" Qin Yining thought about it and did not mention the Tian Jizhi matter. He only said that Marquis Qingyang wanted to come to the residence to capture Qin Huayuan, but Ji Zheyu arranged for people to protect him. "When we return, we should properly thank Marquis Dingbei." Pang Xiao was moved by this and nodded, "I understand." Qin Yining asked again, "Did you encounter any danger in the underground palace? There was no food or drink in there. How did you persist for so many days? Look at you, you've lost a lot of weight." Pang Xiao smiled. Just like Qin Yining, he did not mention the various hardships in the underground palace. He only said, "Fortunately, there are people guarding the underground palace all year round. The tributes inside have been changed recently." Although the fruit made from oil and flour does not taste good, it is not difficult to fill the stomach. There is also underground spring water, so you won't get thirsty. That's better. It's just that in that kind of environment, you can't be sure if someone will come to rescue you. It is truly torturous. No. I'm not worried about that. Pang Xiao's index finger wiped the tear stains on Qin Yining's face. He smiled and said, "Because I know that you and Jilan will do everything you can to rescue me. Even if everyone else gives up, you too will continue to dig. As long as I can preserve my strength and survive, I will definitely be able to wait for your rescue." Qin Yining heard this and felt much more at ease. He smiled and nodded. He leaned on Pang Xiao's shoulder and gave him all his weight. In the dead of night, the two whispered to each other. After talking for a while, they unknowingly fell asleep. The next day, Qin Yining got up and had a meal. He then ordered someone to prepare a carriage. "Wang Yi is safe at home. Today, I still have to go up the mountain with Marquis Dingbei to put on a play. I also want to check out the situation." This was what he had discussed with Ji Zheyu yesterday. Although Pang Xiao couldn't bear to let Qin Yining be tired from the long journey, he had no choice but to nod. Qin Yining brought along the Bing Tang and Ji Yun's clothes. Under the escort of the imperial bodyguards, they went all the way to Mount Shuangshan. Pang Xiao secretly acted according to the plan they had decided on last night. When Qin Yining arrived at Mount Shuangshan, Ji Zheyu had also just arrived. The foot of the mountain was still surrounded by people from the warden's office. When they saw Ji Zheyu and Qin Yining arrive, they immediately blocked their way. Ji Zheyu waved his horsewhip and said coldly, "What? You said you were going to catch a Taitan spy. What? You don't even recognize this Marquis?" Yesterday, their brothers had been whipped because they tried to stop Ji Zheyu. They were afraid. Moreover, after they went up the mountain, they didn't find the person they were looking for. It was inevitable that they felt guilty. The leader braced himself and said, "This Prince Consort Ji is naturally not a spy." The person in the carriage, Qin Yining, frowned and lifted the curtain. His delicate face was filled with anger. His long eyebrows were tightly knitted and his eyes were sullen. "It was dark yesterday. It's fine if you wanted to go closer to search. Now that the sky is bright, you still can't see clearly. I am the Prince Zhongxian's consort, not a Taitan. If you can't even see this clearly, then don't work in the warden's office." Everyone's faces turned red from being reprimanded. They were stunned for a moment. Qin Yining lowered the curtain and said, "Go up the mountain." Ji Zheyu urged his horse to continue going up the mountain. The people from the warden's office couldn't be thick-skinned and chase after them. They thought that since they were going up the mountain, how could the person they were searching for be in a carriage back up the mountain? Therefore, they didn't search Qin Yining's carriage in detail. They also didn't discover that Qin Yining was alone in the carriage. The carriage smoothly arrived at the scene of the incident. The originally noisy sounds of digging and shouting had completely disappeared. There were people whispering on the mountain, but no one was digging. Qin Yining felt that something wasn't right. After getting off the carriage, Qin Yining and Ji Zheyu looked at each other and walked around a few large trees that blocked their view towards the scene of the excavation. From afar, they saw that the men they had arranged to dig on the mountain were all gathered together, either sitting or lying down dejectedly. They were surrounded by the people from the warden's office. Ji Zheyu said, "Follow the original arrangement. You guys split into groups and continue digging. Your Majesty is trapped in the underground palace. Our rescue can't be delayed for even a moment." Yes. Seeing that Ji Zheyu had arrived, everyone felt reassured and immediately got up to pick up shovels and other tools. "Wait. Don't move." The people from the warden's office who had surrounded them immediately became chaotic. They shouted loudly and didn't allow the people to continue digging. Ji Zheyu coldly reprimanded, "What is the meaning of this? Your Majesty's life is now in danger. but you have the leisure to stop us here. Can you bear the responsibility for delaying the rescue of your majesty? He narrowed his eyes and sneered, Don't tell me you don't want your majesty to be rescued. Are you disloyal, or is it your superior who is disloyal? The more Ji Ziyu spoke, the colder his gaze became. The people couldn't withstand Ji Ziyu's sharp gaze, but they also couldn't bear the accusation of obstructing the rescue of your majesty. They could only relent and no longer stop the excavation. Ji Ziyu arranged for the people to continue digging at the original location. Ji Ziyu stood in place and watched for a moment. When he was sure that everyone was working in peace, he glanced at a few people from the warden's office from the corner of his eye. Ji Ziyu said unhappily, Why aren't you leaving? There are no Taytan spies on the mountain, but you are dawdling here. Don't you really want to rescue your majesty? Of course not. Everyone said at once, We are wholeheartedly serving the country and the people. Ji Ziyu sneered, How noble. If so, your majesty will return and the country will be stable. What's wrong with the people and the country? Don't tell me you are not leaving because you want to take the opportunity to harm your majesty. Prince Consort Ji, don't talk nonsense. Everyone's faces turned red. They couldn't win against Ji Ziyu in terms of reasoning and didn't know how to get out of this situation. Ji Ziyu chuckled. He didn't want to bother with this person anymore and didn't say a word. No one dared to continue to obstruct the excavation, afraid that they would be labeled as traitors and implicate their families. Besides, they had already done what Prince Li had instructed them to do. If they continued to argue, they would only be asking for trouble. They still had to go back and report. Thinking of this, the people from the warden's office left. Chapter 624. When Qin Yining returned to the Wangfu, he removed the threshold and opened the door. The carriage then went straight to the inner residence without any obstructions. In the carriage, Qin Yining explained the situation in the Wangfu to Bing Tang and Ji Yun in a low voice. He instructed, You have to be careful about this matter. Don't leak it out. Yes. Wang Fei, don't worry. We understand the severity of the matter. We will be careful. We won't do anything bad. Qin Yining smiled and said, Of course I won't worry. Last night was hard on you. The night wind on the mountain is cold. Don't catch a cold. I asked them to prepare ginger soup and a pot of ginseng chicken soup. You have to eat some. Ji Yun and Bing Tang felt warm in their hearts. They smiled and nodded. Bing Tang smiled and said, Wang Fei loves to worry. How can we catch a cold? Qin Yining smiled and teased, It's not that we can't catch a cold. Huzi is on the mountain. How can he bear to let you catch a cold? Bing Tang's face turned red. She glared at Qin Yining with a red face and ears. Wang Fei, you're getting worse and worse. You're so bad. Qin Yining looked at her shy appearance and thought that Pang Xiao had been saved. Even if their future was full of difficulties, as long as they were alive, she was not afraid of anything. Thinking of this, Qin Yining was in a good mood. He tried hard not to laugh out loud. When they returned to Saiqing Garden, Qin Yining sent Bing Tang and Ji Yun to bathe and change their clothes to rest. He called for Xian Yun and asked in a low voice, Where's Wang Yi? Xian Yun looked outside the door. After making sure that no one was eavesdropping, she said in a low voice, A few people just came. They said they were your good friends. Old Master's bodyguard Cao asked someone to invite Wang Yi out. Qin Yining immediately understood that Pang Xiao went out to meet the people from the Qingtian Alliance. Although the people of the Qingtian Alliance were not upright gentlemen, nor did they have the talent to govern a country, there were many capable people among them. This time, her and Pang Xiao's plan required the help of the capable people in the Qingtian Alliance. Qin Yining knew that Pang Xiao would be very careful when she went out. She wouldn't even walk in front of the Yarrow clan and Yarrow Chungu, so he was completely relieved. These days of hiding would soon be over. He could only persevere for a while longer. Qin Yining had someone send an invitation to the palace. Tell them that Wang Yi is still in the underground palace, and so is your majesty. I would like to pay my respects to the Empress and Empress Dowager. The Empress Dowager and Li Helan were eating grapes. The newly presented grapes were plump and the juice was rich and sweet. Li Helan ate happily, but the Empress Dowager took two to slow down. "We eat well here. But your imperial brother is in the underground palace. My heart is really going to be full of holes." Li Helan slowly put down her hand and threw the grapes into the plate. She slowly took out a handkerchief to wipe her fingers. "Imperial Mother, don't be sad. Imperial brother will definitely be safe and sound." When Li Helan said this, she was actually not confident in her own heart. During this period of time, Ji Ziyu had been digging on the mountain. During this time, he had only gone down the mountain once. It was clear that the situation on the mountain was not optimistic. Li Helan didn't know what would happen to Daeju if Li Chitian was really gone. But her own brother was sitting in that position, and her cousin was sitting in that position. Naturally, it would not be the same for her. "Imperial Mother, why don't we think of a way to arrange more people to save Imperial Brother as soon as possible?" The Empress Dowager smiled bitterly and said, "It's easier said than done. It's already been 20 days. 20 days. Your Imperial Brother is inside. He's most likely. Imperial Mother doesn't dare to think about it. Even if we arrange for people to go now, I'm afraid." Li Helan couldn't help but frown and say, when the incident happened, why didn't Imperial Mother arrange for more people to go? Li Helan had been pampered since she was young. When she spoke with the Empress Dowager, it was only a mother-daughter conversation. She always said what she thought. She really didn't realize that her words really pierced the Empress Dowager's heart. The Empress Dowager's face couldn't help but sink. "What were you doing at that time?" "At that time, Ijia was busy consolidating our Li family's position in the imperial court. Do you think that if Ijia didn't arrange for Prince Li to be the regent in time and control the Tiger Army's military power in your uncle's hands, those factions in the imperial court would have continued to submit? When your imperial brother was still there, they were still unconvinced. Based on us women, if we don't think of a way to hold on to power, we will die sooner or later." Li Helan was frightened by the Empress Dowager's eyes that seemed to want to eat people. She blinked and swallowed her saliva. Then, she said timidly, "Imperial Mother, don't be angry. Daughter also knows your difficulties. Not to mention anything else, these days when I entered the palace, I was interrogated twice. Those damned eunuchs must have eaten a bear's heart and leopard's guts to search my body. Fortunately, I still have some dignity. They also didn't dare to be presumptuous. There's such a thing." The Empress Dowager was very surprised. She couldn't help but sit up straight and ask, "When did this happen? Why didn't I hear you mention it before? It's just these 2 days." They didn't dare to check daughter's body. Hen also didn't take it seriously. Li Helan saw that the Empress Dowager's complexion wasn't good. She asked hesitantly, "Imperial Mother, what's wrong?" The Empress Dowager shook her head and pursed her lips into a line. Could it be that Prince Li had a rebellious heart? The Empress Dowager thought back and felt that there was something wrong with Prince Li's appearance. The Empress Dowager knew her daughter's temperament very well. She was very impulsive and arrogant. If she told her these things, it was possible that her daughter would give herself away outside. If the noise reached Prince Li's ears, it would be bad. Thinking of this, the Empress Dowager only said, "It's nothing." At this time, an eunuch came to the door and replied, reporting to the Empress Dowager, "Prince Zhongxian's consort has sent an invitation." The Empress Dowager and Li Helan both raised their eyebrows and looked at the door. Li Helan frowned, his face full of displeasure. The eunuch came forward with the invitation in both hands. The Empress Dowager received it and glanced at it, saying, "The Qin clan requests an imperial edict to enter the palace later to pay respects to Ijia. She can be considered considerate. She's just being hypocritical." Li Helan raised his voice in dissatisfaction. "That vixen isn't someone easy to deal with. She's used to selling camels in the 9 countries. Imperial Mother, you must not fall into her trap." The Empress Dowager knew that Li Helan and Qin Yining had always been at odds. Li Helan's heart might still be thinking about Pang Xiao. She didn't expose him in front of his face and only said, "Forget it. If you don't like her, just leave the palace early." This was the Empress Dowager's decision to see Qin Yining. Li Helan was dissatisfied and stood up. Imperial Mother only knows how to side with outsiders. "You want me to leave? Fine, I'll leave." After saying this, Li Helan angrily left the palace with his people. The Empress Dowager looked at Li Helan's back and sighed helplessly. Her daughter was so arrogant and willful. At this juncture, she could only let her be. Right now, she didn't have the extra energy to teach her. Qin Yining didn't know the situation in the palace. After receiving permission, he immediately changed his clothes and prepared to enter the palace. Chapter 625. Qin Yining smiled and hugged Pang Xiao back. She hugged his neck and whispered in his ear, "Don't worry. It's not a dragon's lair or a tiger's den. Nothing will happen. Prince Li does not seem to be an impulsive person. He will not do anything that will harm his reputation, so he will not make things difficult for me. Even so, what if there is an accident?" Pang Xiao's arms were around Qin Yining and he was unwilling to let go. The reluctance and worry in his heart almost drowned him. "Just remember, don't risk your life for this kind of thing. Whether it succeeds or not, I will take care of it." Qin Yining rubbed against the side of his neck and said in a low voice, "I know. I will not let myself get hurt." Pang Xiao took a deep breath to calm herself. She rubbed Qin Yining's head and then touched her high abdomen. She felt the movement of the two children through the thick autumn clothing. A long time later, she took 2 steps back with her hands behind her back and said with a serious expression, "Go." The carriage slowly left Saiqing Garden and headed out of the Fu. She saw that Bing Tang and Ji Yun were accompanying her. One of the 2 Yatu was skilled in medicine, the other was not weak in martial arts. She thought that they would be able to protect Qin Yining if something happened, right? The carriage came to the palace gates. Qin Yining found that compared to when she had entered the palace in the past, there was an extra generation of guards. Stepping into the palace gates, without Pang Xiao at her side and without the Empress Dowager's decree, Qin Yining did not have the right to ride a sedan. She could only walk step by step to Xi'an Palace. Fortunately, Qin Yining's body had been well recuperated. With Bing Tang and Ji Yun supporting her, and the palace attendants leading the way did not make things difficult for her. They always took care of her speed. The journey was not difficult. But before she reached Xi'an Palace, the middle-ranking official guarding the gates of Xi'an Palace came forward with people. He smiled and bowed to Qin Yining. "Greetings to Wang Fei. I have been waiting here for a long time." "Oh, how could I dare to trouble Gong Gong to wait for me? Does the Empress Dowager have something important to instruct me?" Qin Yining smiled dignified. He could already see the hostility in the middle-ranking official's eyes. Zhongguan took 2 steps forward and said with a smile, "According to Prince Li's order, right now the Taitan are on the border, the war situation in the north is critical. In order to prevent Taitan spies from sneaking into the palace, or to prevent Taitan spies from using distinguished officials to bring dangerous goods into the palace, everyone who enters Xi'an Palace, no matter who they are, must be searched." Speaking to this point, Zhongguan smiled until his eyes narrowed. He cupped his hands and said, "Wang Fei, please understand. I am just following orders." The safety of the Empress Dowager is the most important. Don't you think so? Qin Yining's expression didn't change. He thought to himself that Prince Li had indeed become suspicious. It was within their expectations that they would act so quickly. Ji Yun said with displeasure, "Our Wang Fei is Prince Zhongguan's official wife. Prince Zhongguan is your Majesty's adopted brother and the Empress Dowager's adopted son. They are all our own people. Do you still want to search them?" Zhongguan glanced at Ji Yun and said with a fake smile, "Prince Li's meaning is naturally not that he doesn't trust his relatives, but that he is afraid that someone will use his relatives to hide bad things on everyone. Miss, Wang Fei hasn't said anything yet. Why are you so anxious?" His tone was filled with suspicion, as if Ji Yun was the person with intentions he mentioned. Ji Yun gritted her teeth. She felt very indignant. Bing Tang also frowned. If news of them being searched in front of Ci and Palace spread, what would they become? Zhong Guan crossed his arms and smiled as he waited for Qin Yining's reaction. Qin Yining smiled and said, I didn't expect there to be such a new rule. Now that the imperial court is in troubled times, this is also human nature. Zhong Guan smiled and narrowed his eyes. In the end, Wang Fei is knowledgeable. Ji Yun gritted her teeth and snorted. Qin Yining said, however, if you want to search me, it's not up to others to touch me. You can just arrange for an old mama to watch over me. Zhong Guan's expression changed. How can this be? This. How can this not be? Qin Yining said coldly, this king's consort is Prince Zhongguan's legitimate wife. She is a first-rank noble lady personally conferred by your majesty. Could it be that Gong Gong wants the servants to search me? Is this for the Empress Dowager's safety, or is it to deliberately humiliate me? As soon as the words Prince Zhongshan were mentioned, the middle-ranking official trembled. Pang Xiao's power was not as simple as it seemed. If this demon was really angered, the consequences would be unimaginable. Right now, it was unknown whether Prince Zhongguan was dead or alive. It would be fine if he was dead, but what if he was not dead? Prince Zhongguan had previously resisted 33 imperial edicts for this person in front of him. If she blew a pillow wind, would he still be able to keep his head? Zhongguan somewhat compromised. He called 2 mamas over and led Qin Yining, Bing Tang, and Ji Yun to the side room for inspection. Qin Yining was helped by Bing Tang and Ji Yun to undress. The 2 mamas did not dare to come forward and stretch out their hands, but they carefully stared at Qin Yining from the front and back, unwilling to let go of any details. Qin Yining took off his inner clothes and was about to put on his outer robe. One of the mamas said, Wang Fei's inner clothes have not been inspected yet. Qin Yining sneered. Ji Yun raised her hand and slapped the mamas, causing them to cover their face and freeze on the spot. Don't be so shameless. Don't you know what kind of person our Wang Fei is? You want to inspect her inner clothes. Are you worthy? Wang Fei is pregnant with the heir of the Wang Fu. If she catches a cold, even if the 2 of you are chopped into pieces, it won't be enough to compensate. That mamas still wanted to retort, but she was pulled back by the other mamas, so she had no choice but to shut up. The other mamas smiled and said, Wang Fei, please forgive us. We servants are stubborn. Wang Fei is not an evil person, nor is she a spy. We are just going through the motions. Qin Yining smiled, I've already taken off my inner clothes. You've seen everything inside and outside, yet you say you're just going through the motions? I think you shouldn't go through the motions. Check carefully how you want to. Don't come back and blame me in the future. The 2 mamas complained in their hearts. This Wang Fei was too difficult to get along with. No matter what they did or said, it was wrong. They were afraid that Qin Yining would hold a grudge against them, so the 2 of them smiled and roughly checked Bing Tang and Ji Yun. After confirming that they didn't carry any dangerous items, they went out to report. Qin Yining tidied up and left the side room. After confirming that there were no abnormalities, the middle-ranking official let them go. Qin Yining and the 2 maidservants entered Xi'an Palace with great difficulty. They were only allowed to enter the main hall after passing through the palace servants. The Empress Dowager sat at the head of the table and looked at Qin Yining with a slightly tense expression. Qin Yining had a big belly, so her bowing movements were extremely clumsy. The Empress Dowager saw that it was inconvenient for her, so she said, no need for formalities. We're all on the same side, so there's no need to be so polite. Thank you for your understanding, Empress Dowager. Qin Yining stood up and smiled gratefully. Her bright eyes swept over and found that the Empress Dowager's expression was not right. It seemed like she was especially nervous. The Empress Dowager said, Qin clan, why did you come to the palace to see Ijia? Qin Yining narrowed her eyes and looked around. When the Empress Dowager saw this, she immediately understood and waved her hand. The palace servants on her left and right filed out. Bing Tang and Ji Yun remained by Qin Yining's side. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.